Chapter 50-40. The mayor's wife hurriedly covered the children's mouths with her hand and shrank back in horror. Please, Lord Mayor. Now you can have everyone come out and go to the gathering. The old mayor stood up shakily, took out the sound-amplifying mystic weapon he usually used to summon people, and took a deep breath. There were about 400 to 500 people in Wuxia town. At this time, they were all summoned to the gathering. Everyone didn't know the reason, and looked at each other. Upon seeing this, Xiaomu stealthily distributed transformation talismans to Mount Zuolan, Shenwu and the others. The group simply showed themselves openly and stealthily mixed into the crowd of normal citizens, gathering at the venue with the crowd of Royal Manor Town residents. Around the gathering, there were thousands of soldiers from the state of Daliao, all wearing short armor and red feathered helmets. The townspeople of Wuxia town gathered together somewhat timidly. In the cold weather, even if there was a faint ray of sunlight on the horizon, everyone still felt cold in their hearts. Arbor stood in the crowd, looking left and right at the shriveled crowd. He suddenly felt as if he had returned to the Quoto village from several years ago. At that time they were also this weak. When faced with the bullying of the Heavenly Tao sect, none of the villagers dared to speak. They only dared to watch silently, hiding on the side like walking corpses. They dared to be angry, but didn't dare to speak. Today it was still the same. In a different place, with a different group of people, nothing had changed. They were still a flock of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Weakness was indeed the original sin. Arbor frowned and looked forward. That Daliao General Hajuo stood on a stone pier half the height of a person, staring at the townspeople of Wuxia town below with bright eyes. He turned his head and gave his deputy General Gu Er a look. The young general immediately walked to the front of the crowd with half a whip and asked with a chuckle, "Lord Mayor, is everyone here?" The old mayor and his family stood at the front of the crowd. When he heard Gu Er's question, his body trembled, and he nodded silently. Gu Er smiled. "Since everyone is here, let's bring them over." As soon as he finished speaking, there was the sound of iron chains swaying beside him. Everyone felt their hearts tighten as they subconsciously gathered closer to the center. Hua 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 hua. A chain as thick as an arm was dragged over from afar. Standing beside Arbor was a girl about her age, about 16 or 17 years old. Because of her nervousness, her round face was covered with fine beads of sweat. Arbor could clearly hear her rapid breathing, and it seemed that her heart was beating faster. "Ah!" the crowd suddenly exclaimed. Everyone looked along the long iron chain, and saw two large iron cages, more than a meter high, being dragged over by 4 or 5 strong men. Clack, 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 clack. The friction between the cages and the ground produced a series of rough and ear-piercing sounds. In the cage, there were 2 monsters whose faces could not be seen clearly. Their hair was messy and drooped on their foreheads. A pair of small blood-red eyes were staring at them through the cage. Arbor thoughtfully looked at the iron cage a few more times. Looking at the 2 zombies locked in the cage, one big and one small, he felt a sense of déjà vu looking at their figures. One of them seemed to be a boy. Wait, Arbor's eyes flashed, and his sharp gaze once again swept past the 2 monsters in the cage. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. They seemed to be the Fong siblings he met on Lotus Pond Island. "I worked overtime until 10 o'clock today, so I came back too late. I'll sleep first
Chapter
and make up
50
for 2 more chapters tomorrow." Arbor was a smart person
Happy New
who
Year.
grasped the gist
I
of
still
things.
have to work overtime
He immediately
tomorrow,
understood,
so I don't
after
know when I'll
hearing
be back.
Emilien's words. As it turned out,
I'll probably make
that
up
Grand
for it
Preceptor
later.
Lila
Chapter
purposely left these
50-52.
cannon fodder here to
Had
delay
Chapter
drooped his head
50-40
dejectedly. The
This
town's
was
Lila had
currently
actually
extra strong,
calculated
terrified
that they would
as they
definitely
took
rush
Wolf
back
wasn't as
to
fierce
deal
as
with the
before.
situation
Many
and
times
dragon
the
flame
endless
huddled
pressure
together,
of
hearing
about
about other than the
sacred
sound
beasts.
of each other's
The
had
wolf
been
had
reading.
also
Also
completely
completely
stronghold
no other
that
sound
sounded
sprawled on the
imperial
ground and
capital
river
to
in the
lure them
blink of
from
an
its
eye,
voice sounding
At
like
this
a kitten or
moment,
puppy.
Your
The
Highness,
scene of
comical and
400 to
pitiful,
500
Arbor
people
tossed
now.
aside the
That
transformation
one
talisman
hastily
matrix If something happened to Dragon was nervously forward pinching the entire divine everyone's figures were suddenly turned her head to glance at days would no longer in other people's eyes. And they disappeared from the divine like a woman in her early 30s. After everyone's figures disappeared in prosperity, Arbor also couldn't truly do anything about this intruding mouth at the current good time when her image appeared outside the kingdom of Daluo. This transformation his bony hand to Grandel withered as depending on its mood. What kind of confidence, however, it wanted to do such a foolish thing. He couldn't help but mutter silently work out a transportation talisman matrix. The girl called out to Arbor timidly. Even double confinement talisman felt like fucking a dog. Set up in her gaze defensively over the girl. Such extravagance truly wasn't the little crown Jojo was actually called the directional damn transportation. Your whole family is your time. And a comprehensive expression understands why Arbor was looking at me. It was a pity that such a young and talented little girl couldn't flash to Arbor's side. Truly was a Jojo. I like this transportation talisman matrix. At a moment of life, we don't have to walk a long way. Even if there's a rise in the blink of an eye, I met a pair of beady eyes head on. Arbor nodded in agreement. Was the round stars girl sky. He glanced sparkling with a dent and the others chopping knife from behind her. The transportation talisman matrix and made a judgment in less than a second convenient. He scooped up a handful of red powder moment in sprinkled her take out the Arbor glanced Jojo knife in this fellow's hand and who shrank in the corner of her mouth simultaneously darkened fast and stayed. The little stoic Jojo water like it was enough to have a valiant deflecting the poison powder. The venerable at least among the mortals she was about to Arbor's eyes and there were at least some and walked up with and he sized up the man in front of him. Then he glanced at the thing and give people a sense of familiarity. His voice to Arbor raised his hand to block him out. These small soldiers of Daluo were completely defenseless and he sized up the person in front of him again. Woke up from his I remember you. For over as long as they wanted to, and in the past he had never seen such. It was as if she was a malicious spirit howling down in the cage. He truly like a human, but not like quickly throughout a puppet. It gave people so indescribable feelings to leave them here to stall for time. Arbor had already discovered Master Book from him and treated them as a man patted it lightly. The poison was just uncovered and said, "The talisman study it when you have time. Their minds. The world today is very different from the you are that poison master. Settle down in the Wolonshan's hand." Arbor Jojo trembled. Tell Tong from the thought flashed through his mind. As for how to deal with these prisoners, the one who poisoned and that was for the emperor to worry about. He flipped the crown prince experiment that he and his Miss Xiao had a good memory. Saw a picture of a Arbor nodded on the first and drew several bindings. There was a small line of words on it with a flick of his little hands at most of them to bite surrounders and beauties. The speed at which confinement poison formation she might not be able to remember many of their faces and names. Zhualanshan's hands trembled again was dumbfounded. Zombie on the first page she could remember everything that had happened so many years ago. Jumped out of the paper. As long as someone studied it in the middle of the night, as long as heart would probably Arbor didn't waste words with him, she would never forget it straight to the point. She remembered all of the whispers Jojo and would not miss a single detail. The little stoic even if her disciple calls these two in front of us have evolved to cautiously hide it Master Puppet Man's eyes. The clear sky set. However, two intermediate level more puppets were enough to scare out a wisp of his soul. She was already half dead and terrifying subject. They would definitely be with the snake man still hadn't given up on her evil intentions, and the others couldn't possibly escape. Sleep Chapter 5042. Add more tomorrow. Just like now. Maybe 8. When the townspeople saw them open the iron cages and drag out the two corpse puppets, they were so frightened that they couldn't stop screaming. Chapter 5053. The pale-faced women in the front row couldn't keep their legs steady with a cold glint in her eyes. The Fong siblings going to personally interrogate this crawling on all fours, although Zhualanshan was very baffled and completely couldn't understand what Sir Jojo was saying and roared at a fat woman who had fallen to the ground. Once Sir Jojo gave the eyes rolled back, he immediately and she actually fainted on his own accord. At the same time, the mocking laughter of the Doro soldiers came from all around, and he shouted, mixed with a few curses. In the blink of an eye, all there is to the people under the feet of several talismans glowing with purple light from his pocket. Two mid-level corpse puppets the talismans open, and his figure really are a bunch of flowers from everyone's sight. So well the venerable peach blossom immortals John never even knew what corpse puppets looked like before. He ran away. After the mockery, what kind of there was a wave of unbridled laughter. What was his shame? One after another. Did he have no shame as a master? glanced at these Doro soldiers just like from the corner of her eyes and didn't even have the courage to confront the small hand by her side suddenly moved when slightly. This person shouted before running away. Hundreds of thousands of fire was about to explode and make some big spread out from between her fingers. But in the end, Emolien flying in all directions, and he lowered his head to glance at his wifey. The crowd only felt as if some mosquitoes and flies were flying in front of their eyes. As if
and
she
didn't
wasn't
pay
the
too
least
much
bit
attention,
surprised or
but
angry
with the
about
cry of a
Chu
soldier,
Qingfei's escape,
a fiery
she
prelude
suddenly
began.
extended a finger.
This person
and
suddenly
extended
spat
a
out a
second
ball
finger,
of fire
then a
from his
third.
chest.
When the
And
third
it
finger
inexplicably
appeared,
spread to
everyone
the people
only
around
saw a
him.
flash of
It
light
was so
before their
fast
eyes
that it caught people
that
off
idiot
guard,
Chu Qingfei
and there was
returned
no
with a
time to
bewildered
defend.
expression.
The first
This
soldier
idiot
who was
stood
in front of
by
the
the
serpent
fire
man
quickly
and stared
stared
at him
into a
in the
pile
eye.
of bones.
Then he crossed
Falling
his
to the
arms in
ground
front
with
of
a
his
bang.
chest
He
and
was
roared
deader
with a
than
flushed
dead in a
face.
matter of minutes.
Bring it on, little
This
one.
unforeseen
He
event
disappeared
not only
again. The
scared the
venerable
4 to
Peach
500
Blossom of
royal
Royal Manor
couldn't resist
townspeople,
slapping his thigh
but also
and
scared
guffawing.
the Doro
Fuck.
soldiers to death.
What was wrong with
This
this
fire
person?
inexplicably
If you wanted
started
to
burning
escape,
from
then
within,
escape, burning
Why did you have
outwards.
to shout so
It was
loudly
as if a
before
fire had been
escaping?
poured on a
Was this
person's
to
heart,
encourage yourself
abruptly
or to
igniting
show
it?
off?
The
Emerald
crowd
didn't
didn't
know
know
what was
twitched,
going on,
and he lowered
and
his
became
head
more
to
and
look
more
at his
nervous.
wifey.
Unable
He saw
to
that she
control
didn't bat an
themselves,
eyelid.
General
and
Doha
continued to
shouted
extend
angrily,
one finger
"Don't
after
panic."
another. When she
An enemy
extended
has
the third
sneaked in.
finger,
The young
sure enough,
deputy
Chu
general
Qingfei,
Gu Air,
this old
was
fellow,
experienced
returned
and
again.
knowledgeable. With a
He
swish,
immediately sensed
when
that
this
something
old
was
man
wrong.
appeared in front
The
of the
young
serpent
man
man
ordered
again.
loudly.
The
Don't
serpent
panic.
man was on
Pay
guard this
attention
time.
to whether there
He
are
kept
any
looking at
strange
the little
objects
stoic
around
with
you.
his head tilted.
Activate your
When he
defensive
saw the little
profound
artifact
artifacts
raise her
first.
third finger,
Defend.
he was prepared to
Defend.
attack at any time.
The soldiers of the
Therefore,
Luo kingdom
the
shouted
moment
in
the
panic.
light and shadow
One
flashed
after
in front
another,
of him,
they
the
activated their
serpent's huge
defensive
tail
swung
swung
weapons
out
and wrapped
looked
around
around.
Chu Qingfei's
Gu
body,
Er's judgment was
pinning
very
him to the
accurate.
ground.
He immediately
Chu
discovered
Qingfei
that there
let out a
seemed to be many
blood-curdling
tiny
scream.
mosquitoes
He
around
felt
the
as if
Doro
his internal
soldiers.
organs were about to
Mosquito.
be torn apart
It's a
by
mosquito.
the snake's tail.
Damn it.
It was too difficult
Activate
for him.
your defensive
Master
barriers.
Chu was on the
Don't
verge
let
of
these
tears.
mosquitoes get
He
close
really
to
didn't
you.
expect
General
that such a
Hajua
small
was so
mission
angry
he had accepted
that his
would
nose
actually
was almost
make him
crooked
face these
when he
fiends
saw
in
his
front of him
soldiers
so
being
miserably.
targeted by these
If
tiny
he had known that he
mosquitoes
would
one
encounter
after
another
another
and the others,
and dying from
he
the
would never
inside
have
out one
accepted
after
this
another.
mission.
This
He
was
had already
truly an
seen how
unforeseen
powerful
event.
Emolian
Before the
was
main
when he
forces
was
arrived,
underground in
they
Greyfield
planned
Village.
to camp here for
That
1
was
or
a
2
ruthless
days,
character
who had
unexpectedly
destroyed his physical
before the
body
battle
with
had
a
even
single
begun.
strike. His
And he had
soldiers
risked
had
his life to
inexplicably
escape
attracted
with
a
his
swarm
divine
of
soul.
mosquitoes.
The moment
And
he saw
dozens
Prince
of them
Emo,
had been killed.
Chu Qingfei
This
had
really
already
wasn't a
thought of
good sign.
retreating.
Could
When
this
he
be a
discovered
sign
that the
future
future
siege
siege
would
would
not
not
be
be
easy
in
to
front
fight?
of him,
Was
General
originally
Hajua's
Arbor's
transformation
as he loudly
the
berated
fear in
his
his
soldiers.
heart deepened.
Afterwards, he simply didn't think of confronting
Chapter
them head-on.
5043.
His only thought was
Don't
to
roast
escape.
them with fire.
Therefore,
These mosquitoes
he fainted
don't
and
seem to be
hastily
afraid
used
of
a
fire.
transportation
Use
talisman
ice.
matrix to
Freeze
escape.
them.
Unfortunately,
Yes, freeze
he
them.
failed to
As
teleport
soon as the
twice.
general finished speaking,
Several streams of water shot towards the fiery evil mosquitoes
Chapter
flying around in the
5054.
air. The
It was
streams
as if
of
the
water
teleportation
quickly froze
array
into
had
icicles
suddenly
in the
lost
air.
its effect.
But only
No
a few
matter how
fiery
he
evil
teleported,
mosquitoes could
the
be
light
frozen.
flashed.
These
These
little
little mosquitoes
mosquitoes
original
moved very
spot,
quickly.
It was as
flapping
if
their
there was an
wings and
invisible
flying
rope
away.
that hooked him,
It was a fool's
making
dream
it
to want to
impossible
freeze
for
all
him
of
to
them.
teleport.
General
How would
Hajua saw the
Chu
mess
Qingfei
in
know
front
that
of him
when Arbor set
and
up the
could not
trap
help
array,
but take a deep
she
breath.
had already taken
He
precautions.
shouted angrily. She
A
used the
bunch of
power
good
of
for
space
nothings.
contained in her
I told
body
you
to
to freeze
open the
them.
space restriction
Didn't you hear
here.
me?
Anyone
Faster,
who entered
faster.
the range of her trap
Icicles
array would
crackle.
be controlled by
An
the space
icicle formed by
restriction.
condensing
If she
water
didn't
into
take you
ice
out herself,
exploded in front of the
even
general,
if you used the
turning into
teleportation
ice
talisman
crystals that
or the
fluttered in the air,
teleportation array,
the general was
you wouldn't
so
be able
angry
to
that
get
he
yourself
shouted,
out of the
I
space
told you to
restriction
train
here.
hard every day.
There was no other
But
reason.
you can't even do
there was
something
probably
as
no
simple
one
as
in the
condensing
entire
water into
continent
ice
who could
when you
resist
have
her
nothing
martial
to do.
ant space restriction.
You bragged to me that
She
you're
had
a great
also studied the
spiritualist,
space
a great
restriction
spiritualist.
that her master had
When
taught
I
her
really
in her
need you to
spare time.
fight, you're useless.
In just a short period
While
of
he
time,
was cursing nonstop,
it was almost
Gu
impossible to
walked
study
up with
the
the
serious
essence of it.
expression. The deeper she
General,
studied it,
these
the
mosquitoes
more she
must
felt
have
that
been
the
released
space
by
restriction
someone.
was
We must
extensive
get
and
rid of the
profound,
spy in the crowd as
extremely
soon as
mysterious.
possible.
The
Otherwise,
space
these
restriction
fiery
that
evil
she was
mosquitoes
using
will
now
keep
was still
coming.
the power.
If they
that
were
she had
resting in their
absorbed from the
camp
small
and
silver
secretly
ball in the
released a
phoenix
group
woods.
of fiery evil
She hadn't
mosquitoes,
used it all
all
in
before.
the middle of the night,
But
General
now that she had
Hachuo
opened the space
could not help but
restriction,
shrink his neck.
she had almost used
When the
it up.
soldiers received
The
the
remaining
general's
power
signal,
was estimated
they
to be
hurriedly
only
raised
enough
the
for
clubs in
5
their
teleportations
hands
and swung them at the
However,
crowd.
the small
We
silver
can't
ball
waste
that
any
her
more
master
time.
had given her
General
contained a
Hachuo
vast
said
amount of
coldly.
space restriction,
Since these people are
which she had
unwilling to
extracted
cooperate
from the
with
Phoenix
us,
Woods, was
then
only
we'll deal with them
1/10,000th
together.
of it.
Originally,
After using it up,
he had wanted
she could
to
still
use a
draw
portion
more
of
from
them
the
to
small
feed
ball.
the 2 mid-level
Sir
zombie
Jojo thought to
puppets,
himself,
while the rest
Chu
of them would
Qingfei's
be
miserable
selected
howl
to be
pulled
strong or
Jojo's
clever
thoughts
to be
back from the
properly
distance.
modified.
Glancing
But
at
now
him,
it seemed that there
he
was no
snorted
time.
and waved his hand
He could not
to
let
let
the
this
snake
continue.
woman pull Chu
Otherwise,
Qingfei over.
he did not know how many of his
care about a
soldiers
weak
would be
human
left
like
under the
Chu
torture
Qingfei
of
at
these
all.
fiery
He
evil
directly
mosquitoes.
rolled and swung his
If he
snake
could not
tail,
find the spy,
and with a bang,
he would kill
threw
everyone
Chu
present.
Qingfei in front of
They were
Arbor,
just a
as
bunch
if
of
he was a
stupid
dead
Chinese
dog.
anyway.
Don't throw
It
him
did
to
not
death.
matter how many he
Arbor
killed.
roared. Then
cold
she
light
took flashed in
steps
Hajuo's eyes
and hurried over
as
to
soon as he
Chuchingfei.
gave the order.
She took out a
pair
few
of white
hot-blooded
silk soldiers
soldiers
from
from
the
her
country
pocket
of Doro
and put them
raised
on.
the iron
Then
spears
she
in their
grabbed
hands
Chuchingfei's hair
and charged
and
at the
pulled him
women
in
and
front of
children
her.
in the front row.
That rough action
If it
didn't
didn't look
look
much
how could
gentler
those
than the
people
snake
still be
woman.
alive?
Everyone
The
couldn't help
townsfolk
but
of
mutter in their
Wangzhuang
hearts.
town immediately
Arbor
cried
asked
out in
coldly,
alarm.
"Tell
More
me,
than a
did
dozen young
Wuxia
and
send you
strong
here?"
men
It
were
was
looking
time to
everywhere
send that
for
damned
suitable
Wuxia
weapons,
on her way.
wanting to risk
Arbor
their
thought with
lives
a cold
to fight against
expression.
the vicious
He raised
soldiers
his
of the
hand
country of
and took out a
Duoluo.
communication
At this
jade
moment, a loud
talisman
boom
from
was
his inner
heard.
world.
It was as
He
if a
immediately
thunderclap
wrote
had
two lines of
exploded on
small
the ground
words
and sent
all
them
of a
to
sudden,
Yellow Crane
the
Ferry
group of
on the
soldiers
snowy
in the
island.
front row exploded.
Don't keep mooching
This
out
time,
alive. Deal
it
with
was
her.
as if a flower
She
had
was really
bloomed,
fed up with this
and the
woman
ground was
jumping
dyed
out
red
and biting
the
her every
explosion
now
of the
and
divine
then.
power ball
Although she was
shocked
only an
everyone
ordinary
present.
person,
More
her
than a
methods
dozen
were unique.
soldiers of the kingdom
Not
of
only could she
Daliuo,
drive the
who were caught
Shentian
off guard,
prefecture's
were blown
prefecture
away.
lord.
Their limbs
Gung
were
Ping
crippled
Ching
as
to
they
work
hung
for
on the
her.
stone pillars.
But she also had
General
so many
Hajuo's
followers of
pupils
the constricted
constricted
as he shouted,
who were all extremely
defensive
fanatical
shield.
about her.
Defensive
It seemed
shield.
that Jojo's
Gu
life would
Ward
only
as
be
well.
peaceful if all these
Swoosh.
talents were dead.
In front of Hajuo
What Arbor
and
didn't
Gu
know
Air,
was that he
3
had
rows
wronged
of
Wuxia
Wuxia
this time.
immediately appeared.
At this time,
protecting
how
them
could
firmly
Wuxia
behind
have
them.
the ability to
Hajuo was
strategize
cursing
to
in
this
his heart
extent and send
This battle is a
Chuchingfei here to
disastrous
block Arbor?
loss. Chuchingfei himself didn't know that he would meet Arbor in Wangzhuang town
Chapter
on the outskirts
5044.
of the imperial capital.
The worst thing was that
if he
he
knew
didn't
that
even
Arbor
know who
would
the
come,
enemy was,
he would have
or where
run
they
away
were hiding.
800 years ago.
At this moment,
Previously,
he still couldn't tell.
He hid outside
So many
the
soldiers
talisman
had
array
died
he
in the
set up to
vanguard.
watch.
How was
When
he
he
going
saw
to
Emily
explain
from
this to the
afar,
state preceptor?
he didn't dare to move.
When he thought of the state preceptor's stern face, General Hajuo couldn't help but shudder. His entire body trembled.
Chapter 50-55.
At this moment, rows
it was
of
only
Doro
because
soldiers
he saw Arbor
from
and
half
the others
squatting to
leave
standing
using the
upright,
transportation
surrounded the
talisman
two of them.
matrix.
They
that he
erected
dared to
hundreds of
sneak over to
defensive
check
shields
on the
in front of
situation.
them. And
Who
would
would
have
in
thought
unison
that Arbor wouldn't
pay
play by the
attention to
rules
your
at all?
defenses?
And suddenly
The
turned
anger in
around
General
to catch him by
Hajuo's heart
surprise.
was about to
Thinking about
materialize
it,
into
this
sword
person
light.
must have done
Which
this on
friend
purpose,
is stirring up trouble
in
in our
order to
small
lure
town?
him.
Why
A
don't you show
talisman
yourself for a
formation
chat?
master.
Out.
As soon as
He
Hajuo
deliberately
finished his
activated
sentence,
the
he
transportation
saw a ball of
talisman
divine
matrix
power flying
and
towards
pretended
them.
to teleport
It was
away.
like a ball of
In
divine
reality,
power was
they didn't
being
leave
tossed
at all.
around.
When
With a loud
Chuchingfei
boom,
thought of this,
it smashed
he
into
wrung
their
his
shields
hands even more
Countless
and
Doro
inwardly cursed
soldiers
himself
used their
for
bodies
being
to
as
withstand
stupid as
the
a pig.
explosion of the
With
ball of
several
divine
decades
power.
of life experience,
The soldiers in the front
he actually
row,
fell for a
who were
youngster's
bearing the
trick
most
and
weight,
fell into
were
his hands.
immediately affected
Arbor
by the
took out a
explosion
normal
of the
spirit
ball
sword
of divine
and patted
power.
Chuchingfei's
They all
head.
spat out
Tell me
mouthfuls of
honestly,
blood.
did
and
Wuxia
barely
send you
supported
to
their
deal with me?
shield-bearing bodies.
If you tell me the
Hajuo's
truth,
face
I
darkened
might
as he looked
consider
at the
letting you off.
Wangzhuang townsfolk huddled
Chuchingfei's
together.
lips trembled.
Fire the
and
arrows.
he hastily shook
He
his
wanted
head.
to see if this person would
this
still
matter
hide
has
among
nothing
a bunch
to do
of
with
useless
Hallmaster
commoners
Mumu'a
and fish in
the little
troubled
stoic's
waters.
fist landed
He
on
was
his
trying
left
to force
eye.
them out of
Does
hiding.
it have anything to do
behind
with
the
it?
defensive shields?
Yes.
Hundreds of
It has
archers
something to do
immediately
with it.
surged forward.
It was Hallmaster
They all
Mu who
knocked their
sent me
bows
here
and aimed in the
Everyone
direction of the
speechlessly
townsfolk.
twitched their mouths.
The old mayor
The little
trembled as he
stoic
pushed his
This
children
was no
and
different from
grandchildren
beating
beside
someone
him.
into confessing.
He cried out in alarm.
Most importantly,
Go.
This
Go
Master
quickly.
Chu didn't seem to
The
be a
townsfolk finally
particularly unyielding
reacted.
person.
When they saw
After
that the
being
enemy
punched
was about to
3
shoot
times
them
by the little
indiscriminately,
stoic,
he
they
immediately
hurriedly
turned on
scattered
her.
in all directions.
Following her temperament,
They stumbled
he would
and
say
crawled
whatever
as
she
they fled
asked.
for their lives.
In reality,
Thump, thump.
there was a high
Thump.
possibility
A
that
dozen
this
or
matter
so
really had
townsfolk
nothing
fled
to
a
do
few
with
meters
that Hallmaster
before they suddenly realized
that there
she
were
really
4
was a
invisible
scapegoat.
barriers
Arbor's
erected
face
around the
was
meeting
gloomy.
place.
On his chubby
Commoners
little
like
face,
them couldn't see
a pair
clearly
of
at all.
beady eyes
At
gazed
this
at Master
moment,
Chu with a
they were
cold
like a
glint
group
in
of
his
trapped
eyes.
beasts.
Master Chu
Trapped in
couldn't
these
help
4
but
tall
shudder
invisible
again.
barriers.
He kept feeling that if he didn't
The
answer
round-faced
honestly,
girl let out a
the
cry
sword
of
in this
alarm
guy's hand
and
would
kicked
very
the
likely
barrier in
stab
front
into
of
his
her.
chest
He
in the
kicked
next
until
second.
his feet hurt.
I knew it
But
was
he still
Wuxia
couldn't
who
push
sent
away
someone
that
to do
invisible
it.
barrier.
She really has
At
a
this
lot of
time,
flower
many
escorts.
people rushed to the
Arbor
girl's
looked
side,
furious,
kicking and
hitting,
slashed the side of
biting, and
Master
had butting.
Chu's neck with his
However,
spirit sword.
no matter how hard they
Speak.
tried,
Besides
they were
you,
still
who else is following predicament? Are the Clear Sky faction's people all dead? Was this the fate of ordinary people? Answer this question. Don't do anything yet. Grandmaster Chu looked at Xiao with a bitter expression. The round-faced girl he wasn't in charge of the arm of a woman beside her. The woman was a member of the Clear Sky only a few years old. He was actually a member of the Hall of Heavenly Fortune, and she looked like she had gone mad. The reason why he joined Hall Master the round Clear Sky faction was his mind became a little clearer because he would help Hall Master Mu out of the direction she was pointing. It wasn't
place
because
where
he was
4 to
bewitched by
500
beauty like the little stoic
was
said,
now left with
but
only
now,
7 people.
It seemed
After
that
they
the
scattered
stoic
like
face
birds
didn't
and
want to hear
beasts.
any other
7
explanation
men
at
and
all.
women with crude
She had long
appearances.
determined that
They looked
everyone
very
around
ordinary,
Wuxia was under
judging
her
from
skirt,
their appearance,
including him.
These 7
Chu
people
Chengfei,
were about
who
30
was also
years
Hall
old.
Master Mu's
The one
beloved
standing
follower.
at the front was a
If the
short
stoic
woman with
face
a round
wanted to think
face
this
full of
way,
freckles.
he really didn't
Who
have
are you
any
people?
other ideas.
Haduo frowned
Speak.
as he looked
Clear
coldly
Sky
at the 7
sex
people,
whether they're
were they
dead
the
or
ones
not.
who secretly released
I really
the fire
don't know.
mosquitoes,
But
as
smashed
far as
people
I
with the
know,
God Power
the
pearls,
vice head of
they
the
really
Clear
look
Sky
like a
sect
group of
still
village
wants
women.
to rescue Hall
There was
Master
nothing
Mumu.
special about them at
The
all.
little stoic
No
flew
wonder
into a
no one
rage
could
and
recognize
slapped
them
Chu Chengfei's
when they were
shoulder.
mixed in with the crowd.
I just knew that if that woman Mu Qingya didn't die, things definitely
Chapter
wouldn't stop.
50-45.
Then, you're
Then
finally
didn't
willing
you
to
already
come out.
order your subordinates
Haduo
to kill
sneered.
Hall Master
I
Mu
thought you
just
wanted
now?
to continue
In
mingling
reality,
with the crowd.
Hall Master
He
Mu
raised
was
his
truly
hand
wronged
to
in
instruct
today's
the
matter.
archers to aim
Chu Chengfei
cautiously
thought
at the
the
7
viciously.
people on the battlefield. Do you have any more God Power pearls to throw? Ha! Haduo snorted, expressing his disdain and
Chapter
dissatisfaction
50-56.
very purely. Right now,
I don't need to
he
use
truly
God
didn't
Power
want to
pearls
say
to deal
anything
with
more
trash
to the
like
little
you.
stoic. Arbor
In
said
any
coldly
case, no
as she
matter
hooked
what
her
he said,
finger forward.
it would be wrong.
She just needed
The little
to summon a
stoic was
holy
certain
beast
that Mu Qingya was
standing
behind
behind
this.
her.
So what could he
Swanshan couldn't
freaking
help
do?
but twitch his
Speak.
mouth. When the little
speak.
stoic was
I'll tell you
exquisite and
everything.
adorable in the
Chu
past,
Chengfei nearly
she
wanted
would
to
definitely
cry.
look very
Why
good
did he
doing
feel
this?
that it was so
But
difficult
now she was
to
like a
communicate
chubby
with
little
this
oil
woman
barrel
in front of him?
Her face was
At
full
this
of
time,
pockmarks
Chu
and
Chengfei
freckles.
couldn't resist
So she
looking
looked
at
very
Emily
ugly no matter
who
what
was
she
watching
did.
the show from
Suddenly,
the side.
two
His gaze
figures
actually
flashed,
contained a bit
and
of a
two
plea for
slender
help.
and naturally handsome
Your
figures
Highness,
appeared
do you
next
still
to the
remember
little
this
stoic.
humble one?
Jojo, are you summoning
glanced
hubby?
at him expressionlessly.
The little stoic looked
I
back
don't
in
remember.
bewilderment. Everyone,
A pair of deformed
Chu
mung bean
Chengfei said
eyes suddenly
pitifully.
lit up.
I am
Her
Graping
lotus had
Village's
finished
Earth
absorbing
Spirit
ancient
Formation.
Emolyen's soul pearl?
Emolyen's brows
But
twitched
that was to be
slightly.
expected.
When this
Under
person
the main
mentioned
planet's
Graping
12-fold
Village
time
and the
flow,
Earth Spirit
the
Formation,
absorption of soul pearls
Emolyen's
should be
heart
very
couldn't
fast.
help but jolt.
Jojo,
She sized him
why
up
didn't
and
you
nodded.
summon me for a fight?
I remember now.
This venerable
You're
one's
a pawn
hands
that
and feet
Tianyan placed
are
in
about to
Graping
turn
Village
stiff from
to
idleness.
nurture the underground
The
zombies
venerable
of
Peach
Graping
Blossom,
Village.
immortal glanced
Back
at
then,
the other side.
You picked up a
He saw a
ready-made
large group
formation
of
from a
Lua soldiers
heaven-level
using
defensive
defensive
shields
foundation
to form 3
and
human
used
walls
someone else's
and
formation
vigilantly watching
to
them.
set up your own
Arbor
Earth
was
Spirit
about to walk
formation.
toward them when
The
she
outer
suddenly
layer
looked
is down
the
at
Earth
her
Spirit
appearance.
formation. She
And
pinched
the
her
inner
chubby
layer of
bucket-like
defense
waist
is
and
the formation
instantly felt
set
like
up
the
by
sky
that
was
heaven-level
falling down.
talisman master.
What was going on? Arbor's eyes
Why did she
suddenly lit
become
up,
so ugly?
and he said, she
Is it
inexplicably
that
felt like
talisman
she didn't even
formation
have
that
the right to
ancestor
walk
Xiaoyang
to them.
set up?
She
This
couldn't
old
use
man
this
was
damn
bragging
transformation
nonsense.
talisman
He even
next
said
time.
that he set up
How
an
could it
18-layer
randomly
talisman
transform
formation
and
that
not
no one
recover
could break
within 12
open?
hours?
In the end,
Before she compared
Emolyen
herself
saw the
to
existence of a
Zwalanshon
holy
and the
meridian
other ugly
underneath.
people.
Speaking
She
of
didn't
this,
feel any harm
the
when
little
she stood
stoic
next to
recalled
them.
that she should
But
find
now the
time
harm
to receive
immediately
the holy
came.
meridian.
Arbor stopped in her
ancestor
tracks.
Xiaoyang left her.
She couldn't stand
Otherwise,
Emolyen's
wouldn't it be a
tendency
pity
to float
to leave
her
such a
side.
fat sheep in
She
a
didn't
place like
move,
Graping
so
Village?
those two people moved
You're the
over.
person whose physical
Jojo, what's
body I
wrong?
destroyed back then?
What was with the little
Emolyen
stoic's
sized up the
expression?
old man.
She was looking
Currently,
at them
his
oddly.
body was tattered
Jojo,
and incomplete.
your husband came
It
out
was
of
unknown
closed-door
where he
training
had taken
early.
over this body.
Don't tell me you're not
Compared
surprised
to his
at all.
original body,
Emolyen
his
hooked her
appearance
little
was even
hand
more
naturally as he
unsightly
spoke.
than before.
In the end, the
Chu
little
Chengfei's
stoic
tears
abruptly
really
slapped
flowed
his
down.
hand away.
He nodded
before
repeatedly and
Emolyen
said,
could react.
Your Highness, it's
This
me.
fellow gestured
I've
to
already
her
been
current
killed by
appearance
you once
and asked with a
Can
sullen
you let me go this
expression.
time?
Did you
In
guys
your
not
dreams,
notice how different
the
I
little
am
stoic
compared
threw
to
at him
usual?
crisply.
Were these
Everyone
two blind?
couldn't help but want
Not
to
a
laugh
single one
as
of them
they
was
silently
surprised to
glanced
see
at the
her like
child.
this. She
What's the
glared
big
coldly
deal?
at Grandmaster Chu
Emolyen
and grabbed
snorted.
her hand and said
During the
nonchalantly,
Shantian Academy
"You're my
tournament,
Jojo anyway.
it was you.
No matter
She
what you
poisoned
become,
Shagua of
you're
the
still my
hippopotamus
Jojo."
team
And
Zwalan
stood behind Mu Qingya
whose
for
mouth
a
was
long
stuffed
time.
with dog food.
She poisoned
rolled
me one
his eyes
moment
and roared,
and cast
"Are we
curses
still
on me the
fighting
next.
or not?"
She
Just looking
contributed
at it
to
made
my
him
life.
sick and annoyed.
It's you. For a childless
little
old
stoic's
bachelor
roar
like
of "It's
him,
you" was
who had been a
bachelor
forceful,
for several hundred
just
years,
like 3 heavy hammers that pounded on everyone's hearts.
What was so good about a wife?
Eyebrows
Women
twitched,
were creatures
and
who
he
liked to
hurriedly
make a
shook his
fuss
head in
and
denial.
shout all day long.
No,
They
it's
were
not
so
what you
noisy and
think.
annoying.
You're still
In
trying
any
to
case,
deceive me.
You wouldn't find a
Arbor
wife in
punched
this
the old
lifetime.
man's right eye.
Fight.
The old
Arbor
man
nodded
hastily
and cried out
pointed forward
miserably.
with 2 fingers.
Yes, it's indeed me.
Zulanshan,
During the
you were so
academy
powerful
tournament,
when you attacked us
I
at Forget
poisoned your
River.
opponent.
Now
and
you
then
should
also
use
cast
a tenth
a
of your
curse
strength
to deal with them.
But you broke it very easily,
Before the old man could finish
Chapter
speaking,
50-46.
he was slapped silly
Why
by
are
the
you
little
still
fellow's
harping on the
slap.
river of forgetfulness?
From what you're saying,
It could have been
I
over
broke
long
your
ago.
puppet curse.
So that means I
Zulanshan
shouldn't be
suddenly
angry,
leaped
right?
forward,
No,
revealing
no.
his beast form.
He
He
had
had
a
a
human
human
body
body
and
and
a
a
snake
snake tail,
tail,
and his magnificent scales rubbed against the ground. With a flick of his tail, His robust tail heavily smashed into the human shield wall with a bang. His face was truly slapped too painfully. A dozen or so sounds of blood compare to this girl's black heart succession. She only slapped her face until your old face is swollen, and immediately sent the little stoic soldiers glared at her deformed, although there were people rushing up from behind to fill in the gap. You still have the face to cry? The entire shield wall was already on the verge of collapsing. He did so many wrong things due to the overly for someone else. Yet he still had sharply stared in Arbor's direction. He really was promising and shouted with a gloomy expression. Arbor punched her nose. Snake's cultivation is very high. A pair of silk gloves even just for when she beat someone up. No, damn it, dirty. They were originally stationed at Wangjiang town to wait for down as he bawled Preceptor Larry's arrival. Crown Princess. The defenses in this area had already been set up, so they only really hurt to follow the grand state little Crown Princess only hit his capture some people to transform while waiting. The parents of this body's original owner. How delightful would it be to turn those foolish citizens of the divine province into a bunch of brainless monsters that don't know where the crown princess knew how to obey orders and let them fight each other as they pleased. Lying now, their plan to cultivate zombies had just begun, as if it was about to jump out of his chest by these people in front of them, which was hanging by his side until Grand State Preceptor Larry came to rescue them. A light purple talisman General was pinched in his sweaty palm. Repeated this three times his last life-saving talisman before revealing a stiff smile. If this talisman was also useless against the little nonsense, then he would definitely meet his end here today. Arbor habitually gave orders. Don't pretend anymore. When the latter heard the little stoic disdainful glance and sneered, he also inexplicably charged forward out of habit. Tournament. As he charged, he inwardly cursed himself and the others to deal with me. He didn't expect himself to become 1,000 miles away with your disciple after following the prefect for a short while, and lurked around me for more than 10 days, charged into the enemy's camp for an opportunity to make a move. Wherever its long tail swept past, Chu-Ching-Fei's mouth was smashed by the little stoic's fist. No one in Duoluo the corner of his mouth broke. Sacred beast's attack. Teeth fell out, and they all retreated step by saliva dripped down. Emolien grasped Arbor's small hand and said softly, Arbor asked coldly, "These people brazenly set up a stronghold in Wangjiang. The depression in his heart had already reached relying on talisman formation. He suddenly moved his finger. Arbor nodded slightly, but at the same time, and glanced at the transparent barrier around them. On his hand. What kept the townsfolk out of the meeting with a crisp sound was the defensive barrier that had been set up. His hand, which was holding a talisman, bent unnaturally, Grandmaster had spent a lot of money to set up such a large defensive wall. Talisman floating but why didn't he show himself? But there was no surprise on his face. She smashed them with the divine power a light flick of her hand and asked the snake to bully them like this. In the air, but she still couldn't force this talisman master to show himself. Broke into pieces. It could be imagined that this person's relationship with the country of Daluo shouldn't be that good. Chu-Ching-Fei suffered a powerful backlash. She was just curious about talisman out a mouthful of blood. Every time she met a talisman master, there wasn't a single piece of that it would be flesh on his body. His miserable appearance was simply unbearable to look at. She would be able to have a better understanding of her own talisman skills. You dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it. According to the golden talisman jade tome, you also received most of the time she felt too lonely to bring your disciple if he could have a few sparring partners. He would feel that it would be good. You are that great talisman master. Whoever became her sparring partner would hiding behind the scenes all this time. This fellow used the long-lost talisman techniques and muttering golden talisman jade tone to crush others. You should only be at every time she was done. That great talisman master of heavenly fates hidden and reveal a regretful expression. Ever since this fellow's reputation as a talisman master spread throughout the 3 provinces, we once had him lead the way to find you. People wanted to compete with her in talisman. You were as slippery as a loach from beginning to end. No one was a masochist found your residence. Snake it was already empty. And you had already power fled. Was like crushing dry weeds and face was already ashen, instantly crushing the defensive shield formation. The 4th watch made up for the 2nd watch, and Chapter the 6th watch was completed. He stared at Arbor in fright, as if he hadn't heard her words at all. Chapter 50-47. His entire being was immersed in immense soldiers were rolling on the ground as they screamed in pain. General Hashmaster's face darkened as he said finally in a low spat voice, out these words. Retreat. Soon after, he felt that if they continued killing intent flash past the 5,000 soldiers this under young his crown prince would all die here. Was actually they would all be destroyed by someone. Practitioner. In order to preserve their strength, the vast majority they had to endure for now for the sake of long-term benefits. Her identity as a great curse master was in fact a great curse master. He whispered to the young general. He was well aware of what that purple talisman of his might not be able to make it on time. It was a life-seizing curse. We must retreat quickly. Write a curse. If they were to be able to easily dissolve a profound level life-seizing soldiers
Who could
If they
she be?
continued to dawdle,
She was a curse master,
no matter how many people
and a great
they had,
curse master
they would
whose
not
rank
be
in the
enough
art
to
of
be
curses
wiped out by
was a
the
level
snake.
higher than his.
As he spoke,
Earth
the
rank.
snake smashed
Heaven
a few
rank.
more Luo soldiers
There was
to
actually
death.
such a person in
Haduo
this
saw
world
that
who
something
could
was
conceal
wrong
her
and
identity,
hurriedly shouted,
as a heaven-ranked
"Retreat,
great curse master
retreat,
so well,
retreat," deceiving
everyone.
everyone.
Face was
Even
cold
he had
as
fallen
bellowed.
for her old trick.
The panicked soldiers
No wonder
of the
Hall
Luo
Master
kingdom
Mu
had
hurriedly
wanted
fled
the little
backward,
lady to die
like
all these
flies
years,
that had been pinched
but
off.
the little lady
Disorderly
couldn't die
and
every
disorderly.
time.
The entire banquet hall
What
was
kind of
instantly
joke was
filled
this?
with a cacophony
Wanting
of
to kill a
shouts.
heaven-ranked
It was a
great curse
complete
master.
mess.
At
Just
this
by
time,
relying on
no
those
one
2
had
or
the
3
time to
people,
care about others.
just by
They were
relying
too
on a
busy
few
running
mediocre
for their
talisman
lives.
practitioners
The soldiers
or
fled
curse
like a
masters.
swarm of bees.
Could they kill her?
But they were soon
It would really
blocked
be
by
strange
4
if they
invisible
could.
barriers.
You know too much.
General Hato
Xiao
leaped
Mu
onto
said
a
calmly
muscular
as
black
before.
wolf.
She didn't
And the
seem
rest
to
of
be
the
the
Dora
least
Wolf
bit anxious
team
about her
hurriedly followed
identity.
suit.
As a great
Following
curse
their
master
general,
being exposed,
they rushed to the
Chu
transparent
Qingfei's tears
defensive
streamed
wall.
down his face.
Haduo took out
There
a
was
set
no
of
medicine
jade
for
talismans
regret
from
in
his
this world.
sleeves. And
Even
threw
if
them
there
forward.
was,
The little
dozens of
stoic
jade
definitely
talismans
wouldn't be
formed
so
a circle
kind
in
as
the
to let
air
him take it,
and scattered
he
in
was
all
dead
directions.
for sure today.
The barrier
Just
in
by
front of
looking at
him
her calm
disappeared
expression,
without a trace.
he knew that he couldn't
Arbor
be
stood
any
there
more dead.
expressionlessly
And
I
watched
can
Haduo
hand over a
series of
strand of my
actions.
soul to
He sneered
follow
in his
your
heart.
excellency
It
forever.
seemed that this talisman
Chu
array
Qingfei
master
suppressed
was
the
a cautious
unwillingness
person.
in his heart
He did
and
not show
stammered.
himself.
Not
and
everyone
only
has
gave
the qualifications
qualifications
to become
to
this
open
crown
and close the
princess
talisman
subordinate.
array.
Arbor
one
said
thing was
coldly,
for sure.
His cold
This
voice
master
was like
must
a
be
sharp
hiding
arrow
nearby
that
and
stabbed
watching.
into Chu Qingfei's
After all,
heart.
there was
Anyone
no
would
hope
be
left.
curious after
Kill
setting
him.
up such a large
Arbor stood up
talisman
and
array.
said expressionlessly,
"Let's go."
This
When
person
Hato
had
saw
made a
that the
move against
barrier
her
in
time
front of
and
him
time
had
again.
opened.
He had
patted
even
the
chased
wolf's
her
head
for
without another
Li.
word.
From
He rode on the large
Prefecture
black
to
wolf
Wolf
Prefecture.
forward.
His evil
His speed was
intentions
so
had yet to
fast
die.
that even the young
For such a
general
person,
Gu'er,
there
who
was no
following
need to
closely
continue
behind
to
him,
make things
could not
difficult
keep
for
up
him.
with his speed.
What's more,
General
his heart
Haduo
was
had
filled
left
with
them
them
a short
willingness,
distance behind,
and he might even
the soldiers of the
counterattack from
kingdom
time
of
to
Doruo
time.
all followed
How could he be
closely
allowed to
behind
live?
Captain Wolf.
Arbor waved
running
his hand
without
and walked
thinking.
away.
They
A
only
short
wanted to get
scream
far
came from
away from that
behind,
crazy
and
snake's
then
attack
everything
range.
returned to normal.
This human snake was
GC
simply
old Joe
unparalleled,
and the other
without a
citizens
second
of Sin
word.
City all
It
had a
would smash
serious
anyone
look in
it
their
saw.
eyes. Wherever
Even they
its
didn't
huge
dare
tail
to
swept
casually
past,
think about the
almost
identity
everyone
of a
would be
grand
turned
charm
into a
master.
pile of meat
They
paste.
simply didn't dare to
Quick,
make any deep
Gu'er
guesses
patted
about
the wolf's
this
back and
mysterious and
urged
frightening
loudly.
skill.
There was a
They
trace
didn't
of
have much
anxiety in his
contact with
eyes.
the little crown
He
princess.
knew very well that
and only
Grandmaster
knew that
Chu's
she was a
talisman
was
master.
quite powerful.
Now that they
Even
learned
if he
that
had
she
the
wasn't
key
just
to
a
open the
talisman
defensive
master,
wall, but also
it would
a
only
grand
take him a
charm
few
master
minutes
at
to
the
pass
earth rank
through.
or above.
After a few
They
minutes,
couldn't help but
the
respect her a
defensive
bit
wall
more.
would close up
His
again.
Highness the Crown
sealing
Prince
the remaining
and the
people
Crown
inside.
Princess weren't ordinary
Heh.
people.
Gu'er snorted
Fortunately,
coldly.
they had
A
always
hint of
been
ridicule
obedient
flashing
and didn't
in his eyes.
underestimate this
At
Crown
that time,
Princess.
It would
In
be
order
like
to
catching
live more
turtle in a
comfortably in the
jar.
future,
As long as
they definitely
Grandmaster
had to
Chu
be more
sent them on their
cautious
way
in their
outside the
actions in the
talisman
future.
array, they would have a good time. Apart from that human snake whose realm could not be determined, everyone else would be in for a bad time.
50-59. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked over with a grin
Chapter
and said,
50-48.
I searched the sky
The kingdom
just
of
now.
Luo soldiers
This
followed
person
Wolf
is from the
Troop
Hall of
as they
Heavenly
charged
Fortune
out of the gap
Talismans.
in the defensive
The
wall.
reason he joined
They
the
didn't
Clear
even
Sky
turn their
faction
heads
is probably
or
because
dare
of
to take
benefits.
another look behind them.
Muqingya
as
is
they
truly
continued
generous
to
to
dash
him.
forward.
Muqingya already
Zhualanshan
gave
was
him
a
many
bit dumbfounded
benefits
for that
He
small
slithered
matter
to
of
Arbor's side
poisoning
with the
Shenxian
snake tail
Prefecture
and asked in
According
confusion,
to his memories,
are we going to
there
let
are at
them
least
leave
3
just like
people
that?
in the Hall of Heavenly
How's
Fortune
that possible?
Talismans,
The
whose
venerable
talisman
Peach
level is
Blossom
higher than
Immortal
his.
rolled his eyes at him.
One of them is his teacher.
Of course our
Great
Jojo
Master
has a
Yi.
backup plan.
Jojo should have exchanged
Zhualanshan
blows
nodded
with him
with a
before.
sluggish expression
The other
and
person
said,
is called
Let
Luo
me think.
The
He's
little
the Vice
stoic
Hall
isn't
Master
an
of the
open-minded
Hall of Heavenly
person.
Fortune
How could she let
Talismans.
these people leave
Arbor
just
nodded.
like that? I know
Arbor
him.
turned to
I
glare
don't
at
really
him.
remember that
Emolian's
great
mouth
Master Yi.
twitched.
I met
and he
this
rebuked
Luo
Zhualanshan
not long
with a
ago
talk
in the
face.
Tianji Mystic
Don't
realm. speak if you don't know how to speak. Should have also met great Master Yi before. And every time they spoke, said it always sounded off. According to Chu Qingfei's memories, his master's original intention was to say that the little stoic was someone who repaid kindness with kindness. This young sir is probably either eldest Qin or Omega Kotoku. So she shouldn't have let that General Hajuo leave just like that. But he shouldn't be felt that this action didn't seem normal like the little Jojo doesn't remember him. In the end, grasped the little fatty's hand with a very solemn expression, and he was referring to the other person who didn't use words master to convey his meaning. Yuan shut his mouth faintly, but he was very puzzled on the inside. Very mysterious. This little girl was truly too difficult to handle. Great Master Ye's like disciple, the weather in March, has never seen that this little face before. Of hers really changed. According on to a whim. Speculation, she was fine this just person now, is extremely but now she immediately heaven-ranked great talisman Ignore master. Him, he's uncultured. Arbor uttered Emo Lien pulled his wife's hand and said quietly, The venerable
Later,
Peach Blossom
we'll find him a
Immortal's lips
teacher and
twitched as he
properly
smiled.
educate him on
He
popular
walked up
culture.
to the little stoic
Tell
and
him
said,
not to use these
Jojo,
idioms
I've
carelessly
said
in
so
the
much
future.
to you.
But you're
Arbor
only going
pursed
to
his
reply
small
with
mouth
one word
and nodded reluctantly.
It's already good enough
She
that
looked
you
up
have
at
it
her
no.
husband,
Emily
and then rolled
lowered
his
her head
eyes
to
and
look
pulled
at
his
herself.
rash wife to his
A
side.
faint trace of worry
Jojo
rising
usually
in her
doesn't
heart.
bother with
Her current
people
appearance
when
as
it
a
comes
fat
to
winter
topics
melon
that don't
Why
interest
did she
him.
feel so disgusted
Xiaomu
standing
silently
next to
glanced
her
at her
husband before
The
pulling
little
back her
stoic
chubby
pulled
hand.
a long face
You're
and
spouting
pushed the man.
nonsense.
Move
How could
over
she
a bit.
ignore him?
His Highness
Usually,
the Crown Prince
no matter
blinked
what others
and looked
said
at
to
his
her,
wife in
she would definitely
incomprehension.
respond.
Why?
After dealing
Not
with
really
Chu
compatible.
Fei,
How
how
could
could
it
it
not
not
be?
be?
Real
Crown
teleportation
Prince
array
Emil
from his
abruptly
sleeve
reached out
and
and
opened
picked up
it.
his wife.
Just now,
Wife,
they
you
had all
matched me no matter
disappeared for
what
a
you look
moment
like.
because
Arbor
Arbor
widened
had
his
activated
deformed
the
beady
invisibility
and glared
glyph
at him
array.
angrily.
At the same
He
time,
raised his little
he had
hand
used
and
the
smacked
power
him
of
on the
space
head.
in his body to
Don't
teleport
mess around.
everyone
I'm
a
not
certain
fooling
distance
around.
away.
Prince
He had
Emil
completely
blinked and
lowered
lowered
his
his
head
head
to
to rub
rub
her hair,
causing him to
We've
muster
been
up
married
the
for
courage
so
to
many
walk
years,
out.
Jojo.
As a
Before
result,
he could finish
he was
his
caught
sentence,
red-handed by
he
Arbor's
felt
men.
a force pushing
Jojo
against
wasn't
Jojo's
someone
lower
who liked to be
abdomen,
tricked,
trying to
but
push
she
him
often
away.
tricked others.
Emily
If the
was
little
shocked
stoic
and
truly
didn't
wanted
dare
to
to
scam
resist.
someone,
She could only
based
allow
on her
the
methods
force
and
to push her back
character
2
since she was a
steps.
child.
She
She
glanced
could
at her
basically
daughter-in-law,
scam someone
who was 2 steps
successfully.
away with an
Whoosh.
aggrieved expression.
The group of people
Arbor couldn't
immediately
help but want to
disappeared
laugh.
from Wang
He raised
Zhuangzhen's
his
trapping
hand to
array.
touch his stomach
At the
and
same
snorted.
time, all the
Baby Emma
residents of
doesn't
Wang
like you.
Zhuang were
This
taken
was
away.
not the first time
When
he
he
appeared
pushed his
again.
father away,
Everyone
the
could
pitiful
not
His
help
Highness
but
the
let out a
Crown
long
Prince
sigh of
despised
relief.
him.
Thank
So much,
goodness,
even before
thank
his child
goodness,
was born.
they didn't fall
On the
into
other
a ditch
side,
or
the
crash into a
venerable
wall
Peach
this time.
Blossom Immortal
They
truly
appeared
couldn't
very
stand
normally
it anymore.
500 meters
He
away
padded
from
Zhualanshan
Dragonflame
next to him and
City's
said,
East City Gate.
"Let's go ahead
Just
and
from the
take a
city
look."
gate,
Those
everything
people
looked
should be
very
back by
normal.
now.
People
Which
shuttled
people should
in
be
and
back
out of the
by
city
now.
gate normally,
Zhualanshan
and lined
followed
up
him
in
in
an extremely
bewilderment.
orderly manner.
They didn't go far
Arbor
before
and
they
Emily
saw
dust
dust
looked at each
swirling
other.
in the distance.
Should we
A
directly
large
enter
pack
the
of
palace?
black wolves was
This
carrying
place
a
looked
group
normal.
of panic-stricken
Could it be
Doro
that the
soldiers
inner
as
court
they
of the
retreated.
palace was already
It was
under
as if there
someone's
was a
control?
ghost behind them.
Chapter 5049. The group of people fled in all directions, not
Chapter
caring about their
5060.
image at all. Emily
Some
was
even
the best
crawled
at
3
reading little
times
girls'
with each
thoughts
step,
and
ever
rolled on the
since she was
ground,
young,
as if
he
their
could
legs were
immediately
so weak
understand
that they
they
couldn't
couldn't
even
even
lift
lift
them
them
up.
up.
Gaze.
Zhualanshan
When he
was
saw her
baffled.
current
He
expression,
looked at the
he
venerable
couldn't
Peach
help but
Blossom
shake his head
Immortal in
with confusion.
confusion.
Don't
What's wrong with
underestimate
him?
royal father.
As soon as he finished
wasn't
speaking,
the old great king
he
of
saw
the
a
Emo
large
kingdom.
swarm of things
So how
rushing
could his
over
father
from
be
behind
so
the Luo
easily
soldiers.
controlled?
From
Even
afar,
if he had already
it looked like
allocated
a black
all of the
ocean,
U-court guards for
making
him to
one's
use,
scalp tingle
Emilian
uncontrollably.
didn't believe that
The
his
rolling
old
little
father
sand
didn't have
scorpions
anyone he
rushed
could
over
use
in
by
great
his
jubilation.
side. Furthermore,
Like a tide,
his father
they
strength
surrounded the
wasn't
soldiers
something
of
that
the
his
kingdom of
deceitful
Daluo.
adoptive father
Soon,
could compare
the
to.
thousands of Luo
Even
soldiers,
if the kingdom of Daluo
as well
had
as
already
Haduo and
secretly
Gu Er's
snuck into
group,
the palace,
were all trapped
it was
in a tight
impossible for them to
encirclement.
control
They kept
everyone
moving
at the first
forward,
moment,
shrinking the
Don't dream of
encirclement.
1,000
Fuck,
years.
what are these things?
We'll enter the city
Zhualanshan
normally
hurriedly
and observe
retreated
the
a few
situation
steps,
from the
his scalp
outside.
tingling.
Emilian
Boom,
curled
boom,
his
boom,
lips
boom.
and couldn't help
The
but
stone
sneer.
slabs around
If
them
the
suddenly
city
flew
flew
up
with the kingdom
and
of
stacked on
Daluo's
top
people,
of each other,
then they will
quickly
naturally
building
find
4
an
high walls
opportunity
around
to
them.
send a message
They
to the
rotated
palace.
noisily.
If they
Trapping
can't control
everyone
the
in these
palace
stone
immediately,
slabs,
then they
Haduo
won't have
and his
that
group's
opportunity
eyeballs
in the
almost
future.
fell out of their sockets.
Most importantly,
They cautiously
we have to
moved
carefully
left and right,
inspect the
looking
city
back
to
and
see
forth.
if someone has
They
set up
saw
a
that the
talisman
original
matrix.
invisible defensive
Arbor
wall
quickly
had
nodded
been
when he
replaced
heard
by
this.
stone slabs.
Jojo's lotus
These
was
stone
still the
slabs
most
that had
considerate.
suddenly erupted
There
from
were
the
many
ground were
commoners
now
in
like
the
moving
city,
city walls,
so they shouldn't be
stacked
harmed
up
by
from
the
top to
kingdom of
bottom,
Daluo's
left to
talisman
right,
matrices.
trapping
Since
everyone
they planned to
firmly in
enter
this
the city
area.
normally,
The townspeople
everyone
of
followed
Wangzhuang
the queue
town
were huddled in a
Soon,
corner.
Arbor
The 400
noticed
to
that the
500
gazes of
people
the
wanted
people
nothing
around them
more
were
than
a
to
bit
shrink
into a speck of
especially
dust,
the two women
not
in front
wanting
of
to
them.
attract the
They
attention
turned
of
their
these
heads
people
several
in front
times,
of them,
and
these
cultivators
sized her
easily
and
destroy the
up.
heavens and the
At
earth.
first,
The
the
entire
little
town
stoic
could be
be
razed
razed
to the ground
what was
by
going
them.
on.
They hoped
But
that
when
the
she saw
immortals
those
fight
women
wouldn't
turn their
affect them.
heads several
In
times
the
to
eyes
look
of these
at them,
cultivators,
she suddenly
the
had an
commoners of
epiphany.
Wangzhuang town
She lowered
were
her head in a
ants.
flash of
Arbor
inspiration
looked coldly at
and
General
saw her
Haduo.
husband holding
The
her
latter
little
rode on
chubby
the big
hand
black
in a grand
wolf
manner
and met her eyes.
The little crown
He couldn't
princess
help but be intimidated
pulled her
by the
hand
cold
away.
light in her eyes.
Her current appearance
and his heart
especially resembled
slightly.
a rich woman
Guer
who kept
wasn't
a
as calm
gigolo.
as Haduo.
She wore a blue
He couldn't help but
satin-lined
shout when
jacket
he saw the
and a
scene
silver
before him.
hairpin in her hair.
Don't think you
But
can
that
trap
didn't
us
seem
like
right.
this.
In
Grand
order to
State
match her
Preceptor
status
Larry
as a
is
commoner
almost
in
here with his
Wangzhuang
men.
town,
Once our
she
main
had
forces
disguised
arrive,
herself as
all
a
of you will
commoner
die.
when she mixed
Grand
in with
Preceptor
the crowd.
Larry, Grand
Mo
Preceptor
Lien,
Larry,
who was beside her,
when all the
was
soldiers
dressed
of the
in a
country
white
of
robe
Dorwo
and
heard
looked
this
like an
person's
elegant
name,
young master.
it was as if
At a
they were
glance,
injected with
one
chicken
could
blood.
tell that he was
They
from a
clenched
noble
their
family
fists and
Was she
shouted
a
out
poor
in
woman
an uproar.
keeping a rich man
Arbor
as her
waved his
mistress?
hand,
and
Crash.
released a cloud
This
of poison
image was
powder.
really enough.
The voices
Arbor
of the
couldn't
Doro
help but
soldiers
curse in his
immediately
heart.
stopped.
If he had known
Everyone
that he
was
wouldn't be
speechless.
able to recover,
You're so long-winded.
he wouldn't have used the
Arbor said
transformation
impatiently.
talisman. Search his
What are
soul
you
and
looking
see
at?
when that Grand
Yuan
Master Lila
Shurchen
will roll
snapped
over.
at the two women who were
If he was
staring at
fast,
them.
he could
Were they
wait for
crazy?
him here.
Why
and
did they
catch them
keep
all
turning
in
their
one
heads
fell
to
swoop?
look at them
If there
instead
were
of
still a
queuing
few more
properly?
days of travel,
The two women
then
muttered
there
a
was
few
no
words
need to wait,
and gave
who
Arbor
would
a
have the
strange
time to
look
wait
before
here all
turning
day
their
for
heads
them to
back.
attack.
The little
Emolian
stoic
was
really wanted to
displeased on
remind
his
his wife
wife
that she called
she
him
lowered
Lolly
her
the
head
Great
to look at her
State
bucket-like
Protector.
waist
Not
and her
Lila,
thick and
however.
small arms and
The
legs.
impatient expression
Before
on his wife's
harumping
face
indignantly.
made him silently
It's fine,
give up.
husband likes
Forget
it.
about this kind of
Emolian
small
said
matter.
with a grin.
Whatever
Who
his
cares
wife
what
says
other
is
people
right.
think?
His
Let's
wife
go
can
our
call
own
him
way.
whatever she wants.
The venerable Peach
I don't think
Blossom
there's a
Immortal
need to
rolled
search
his
his
eyes
soul
and couldn't help but curse in his heart.
frowned and said with
I
a
beg
firm
you,
expression,
stop trying to
there are
curry
no
favor
signs
in
of
front
any
of
large
JoJo
army
all the time.
within a radius
You're
of
simply
several
too
hundred
shameless.
miles.
It was especially irritating to see heaven and earth grabbing the opportunity to feed other people dog food.
JoJo,
The group
he's
successfully
lying to you.
entered the
He's lying
eastern
to
city
you.
gate.
No one
Less
came
than
here
a
at all.
second after
He's
stepping
just
into
stalling for
Eastern
time.
Street. What
The
Grand
little stoic
Preceptor
expression
couldn't
There's
help
no
but
such
change
person.
slightly.
Zwalonjit
hurriedly slandered.
Emolian asked
Damned
softly.
liar.
There's an
Arbor
unusual
flew into a
smell
rage
wafting
when he
through
heard
the air.
this. He slapped the stupefied Gu'er across the air. How dare you lie to JoJo? Arbor slapped Gu'er's face in anger. Gu'er's face
Chapter
immediately
50-61.
tilted heavily to the
Emolian
left.
was startled
Five
and
fingerprints
hurriedly
appeared
asked,
on his face.
Could it be that
he
the
was
people
still in
of
a daze
Dayuo
from
have
the
already
slap
poisoned
and
the
had yet
city
to
after
react?
they sneaked into
Prince
the city?
Emil hurriedly shouted,
It smells like special
JoJo,
pollen.
don't move. Arbor
Let
looked
me
up
do
at the
it.
gray sky
As
and
he
narrowed
spoke,
his eyes
he
slightly.
had already flown over like a
Emolian
rabbit
used a message
while
talisman
he landed
to summon
a dozen
someone,
punches on
but
Gu'er.
after a few seconds,
he didn't forget to turn
a
around
black-clothed youth
and
appeared
send a
in front of
flying
them
kiss
and
to his
bowed in a low-key
expressionless
manner.
wife,
The venerable
Go
Peach
and quietly
Blossom
bring the
Immortal,
general guarding
who was
the
standing
east
at
city
the
gate
side,
here.
couldn't
I have
help
something
but
to
raise
ask
his hand
him.
to cover
Yes.
his face.
JoJo,
He
there's
thought
a
to
small
himself,
tea house nearby.
Emolian's skin
Let's
is
go up
getting
and wait.
thicker and thicker.
Everyone
Now
quietly
it's getting
went to
worse.
the tea house,
Acting cute
After
my
a
foot.
while,
Just
a
looking
personal
at it
hidden
makes my
guard
eyes brought a
burn.
middle-aged
Arbor
general
was
upstairs.
speechless.
The
What
man
should I
was
do
sweating
when my
profusely
husband has no
and had a
bottom line?
nervous expression
However,
on his face.
my husband looks
when
so
he
good
saw
when he
Emolian,
smiles.
he hurriedly
He's like a
went up to
flower
greet
that
her.
needs to be cared
In
for
the
and
past 2
nurtured.
days,
He'll
did you
definitely
discover
grow stronger
anything
and
unusual
stronger
in
in
the
the
future?
The middle-aged
JoJo has to
general
work
in the
hard
east
to
city
nurture
shook
him.
his head.
He can't
But
let
then
the
he
flower
seemed to
grow
have
crooked.
thought of something and
While he was
hurriedly
pondering,
added,
student
before
demo
dawn
had
today,
already landed
a
dozens
big black
of bird
punches,
appeared in the sky
knocking
above
the
the
unlucky
city,
Gu'er
but it
off the
quickly
wolf's
flew
back.
away. He fell
At
to the
that
ground
time,
in a tragic
we sent a
manner.
master
His
archer
tumble
to shoot it
caused
from
his
a
head
distance,
to land on the dirt
but
floor with
unfortunately,
no stone
the
tiles on his
distance was
face.
too far.
When he
and
ate
he
a
couldn't
mouthful
hit
of
it.
dust, his
That
nose,
black
mouth,
bird
and
flew
face
too
were all
high,
broken,
piercing through the
Gu'er
clouds.
howled miserably
Those who
several
weren't of high
times as he struggled
cultivation
to
couldn't
get up.
shoot it at all.
But Crown
That
Prince
master
Master
archer
Archer
only
only
shot
down
its
with
tail
a swift
feathers
kick and shot down
Gu'er's
2
eyes
black
stung.
feathers. He had the
Other
urge
than
to
that,
cry.
there was nothing
Oh my
unusual.
God, who can save me?
Prince Emo
What
and
if I
Arbor
encounter
looked
a
solemnly
lunatic
at each
with
other.
extremely strong
It
killing
doesn't seem
power?
like Tianyun's style.
Arbor coughed softly
Arbor
and
said
waved
with a
his
frown.
hand. The
Stop.
previous few times
Listen to what he
Tianyun
has to
attacked,
say.
it was always
Emolian
remote
stealthily
villages or
retracted
places
her
where no
long
one
leg
lived at all,
and lowered her head
His
to look
biggest
at Gu'er,
operation was to
who had
attack
been
Song
trampled
Jozian
into
City.
the mud by her.
But in the end,
She
it
snorted
also
and
ended in
said,
failure.
"Don't pretend
Arbor
to be dead.
continued his analysis.
If you continue to pretend,
although their current
I'll really
frequency
kill you."
of action has increased
Everyone
a
was
lot.
speechless.
It's not
Gu'er
to the
struggled
extent
to
of
raise his
directly
head.
attacking
He
divine
looked extremely
prefecture's
miserable.
imperial capital.
Half of his face
Qin
was
Shen
covered
and
in
the others
bruises,
aren't that stupid,
and his eyes
are
were
they?
almost
How
squeezed
could they
into two
rashly
slits.
attack Dragon Flame
Grand
City
State
before they're
Preceptor
fully
Larry,
prepared? His
original
original plan
nodded.
was to stop Wang
I also
Zhuangxin
feel
today.
that this is a bit strange.
Gu'er said in a
It's
trembling
very
voice,
different from
his face
Tianyun's
full of
usual
helplessness.
practice.
The
This
reason
time,
why
he
Tianyun
didn't dare
took
to
down
speak
Joey City
carelessly.
Fortress
After
before
all,
was because
in
that
the other
place
part
was
of
originally
camp,
ungoverned.
other than the extremely
After
powerful
that,
snake
it's
man,
easy to understand
this
why he
crazy
attacked
person
Wang
in front of
Chuan.
him was also also
the river
very
of
powerful.
Forgetfulness is vast
Guer
and
lay
rich
there
in resources.
and looked up at the other
If
party.
we can take over
He
the
couldn't
entire
help but
river
feel
of
that the
forgetfulness
psychopath's aura
and use
and
it as a base,
consciousness were so
it will
strong
provide
that
them
he
with
could crush
many
him with just
convenient
a finger.
resources for their
Even an
subsequent
ant is nothing
operations.
more than this.
Arbor and
Guer
Emil
thought
looked at each
dejectedly,
other again.
facing such
This
a
matter
powerful
is not
person.
led by the
He
heavenly
really
fate
couldn't
emperor.
muster up the slightest
Tian
thought
Yin
of
is actually
resisting.
cooperating
Arbor
with a small
sniffed and
country
thought for
like
a moment.
Duoluo.
You
What
mean
are they
your
after?
leader didn't keep
Unless
the
they
appointment?
can get a lot of benefits
Yes,
from the
esteemed
kingdom of
madam.
Daluo.
Guer nodded
What kind
and
of
answered
benefits
honestly.
could make Tian
Emil
Yin willing to
suddenly
do this
frowned.
favor?
Arbor
And
had
accept such an
interacted with him for a
unreliable
long
task,
time,
and
your
was
Emo
familiar
clan
with
has
his
a
words and
long-standing
actions.
grudge with that
Seeing
whatever
his
Duoluo
frown,
kingdom.
he knew that something
Xiaomu
was
asked
wrong.
curiously.
He quickly walked
Emil
over and
shook her
asked in
head.
a low voice,
What grudge
"What's
could there
wrong?
be?
Is
I've
there a
never
problem?"
heard of such a small
Emil
grassland
nodded
country
gravely.
before. If
These
they hadn't
people
come up with
deliberately
Lily's
stayed here to
plan
delay
and
us,
jumped up and down in front of the crown prince, the crown prince wouldn't even know what they were. Is that so? Arbor glanced at the crown prince in confusion. But I keep feeling that Duo Luo seems to be targeting your Mo clan. Although that Lilier plan is quite annoying to me, it seems that the target of the plan should be you. Chapter 5062. They want to take me away from you, and use this to threaten you. They must be plotting something from you. Based on how much Jojo's Lien cared about Jojo, these people must be plotting a gargantuan benefit. When Mo Lien heard the words Lilier's plan, his entire face darkened. They will all die, he said coldly. The people he sent out were already searching everywhere for those Lily heirs. As long as this plan dared to continue, he dared to kill everyone he saw until all these fakes were destroyed. Arbor sighed and said dryly, "They are also pitiful women." Jojo. Mo Lien glanced at her with displeasure. Fine, fine. Arbor nodded repeatedly and said, "I know that most of them probably brought this upon themselves. I don't pity them." She only felt that it was a pity. Why did they indulge in such wild fantasies, and want to become someone else? Wasn't it good to live their own lives? Before the plan was carried out, those Lily heirs already knew what kind of life they were about to face in the future. They willingly became this fake, and wanted to replace Arbor. Their thinking was extremely naive and laughable. Furthermore, don't you think it's funny? Who did those Lily heirs meet? Arbor shook her head exasperatedly. They met that bipolar fellow Ming Yasi, found Duan Yu, and even met Mo Lien. What kind of freaking excellent luck was this? Jojo. Mo Lien helplessly squeezed his wifey's hand. Let's not stray from the topic. Oh right. Arbor nodded. Since the nightcaw bird appeared in the eastern district, then the pollen smell I smelled in the city must have been spread by it. Now that we're in such a hurry, I also don't know what the nightcaw bird spilled this time. Arbor clenched her small fists and lightly slapped the table. How about this? I'll first prescribe a few more types of antidote. Forget it. I'll spray it with all kinds of antidotes first. All right. However, this city still needs to be under martial law for the next few days. Have the people from the patrol camp in the city strengthen their patrols. If they discover a sick person, they must immediately report it. All right. Mo Lien nodded again, and turned to look at the middle-aged general who was sweating profusely. That general had already understood the young Crown Prince Consort's intentions. Did the Crown Prince Consort mean that the large black bird that appeared before dawn this morning was sent by the Heavenly Fate Palace to scatter the medicinal powder? Go back. Be more vigilant these few days. 4 hours later, Arbor and Mo Lien used the transmission talisman formation multiple times and wandered around the entire inner city of Dragon Flame City. Fortunately, they were teleported out of the city twice, so they had no choice but to secretly turn back. Fortunately, after going back and forth, Arbor didn't find any traces of the people of Daliu setting up array glyphs. Instead, he studied the original Great City Protection Array of Dragon Flame City from inside out. The original Defender Array of Dragon Flame City was completed hundreds of years ago. Mo Lien said softly. Every year, Father would send a special team of talisman masters to carry out talisman power transmission and maintenance. Although it has never been activated, the array glyphs are still intact. At this point, he lowered his head and glanced at his wifey. Jojo, isn't that right? On the way here, Arbor had studied the Defender Array of Dragon Flame City. It was indeed an extremely expensive defensive array from 100 years ago. Chapter 5063. The array disk was set up in the southwest of the palace, and the talisman power inside was also very abundant. The person who set up the array must be a heaven-level talisman master. And there might be more than one person. Dragon Flame City was huge. Without 3 heaven-level talisman masters, it would be impossible to set up such a large array in a month. Very good. Arbor nodded. There was really no need to worry about Dragon Flame City. Once the Defender Array was activated, even if 100,000 soldiers attacked the city from the outside, they would not be able to break it without 3 months. Arbor looked up at her husband. It's a very powerful multi-layered defensive array. There's really no need to worry. Mo Lien grinned and took his wife's hand. Since there's no big problem in the city, let's go back to the palace. The two had just returned to the tea house at the east gate when they saw a horse galloping toward them. At the entrance of the tea house, the person on the horse hurriedly dismounted, rushed forward and bowed. Xiao Chu greets your highness. Emolian raised her eyebrows slightly and thought, my old father is really well informed. He got the news so quickly and knew that I was back. Xiao Chu was the chief palace maid by his side. She had been dutiful all these years. Before his mother woke up, she had been in charge of the affairs of the palace. Everyone thought that this chief palace maid would one day turn the tables and be conferred the title of consort by the emperor. But reality proved that she did not. His Majesty saw a golden dragon flying dozens of times above the imperial city and knew that your highness had returned. Your highness must have had a hard time going to the river of forgetfulness. His Majesty said that your highness should quickly enter the palace. Emolian knew that after letting Little Seven circle in the air dozens of times and sprinkle a dozen kinds of antidote powder, she knew that her whereabouts could not be hidden from some people's eyes. It seemed that nothing important had happened in the palace. So why did the Grand State Preceptor of Daliao send people to block them at Wangzhuangzhen? Arbor also did not understand and looked at her husband with a puzzled expression. Only now did Xiao Chu see that her crown prince was holding the hand of a small woman with short arms and legs. Whether it was their height, figure, or looks, the two of them were worlds apart. It was too eye-catching. Xiao Chu looked at Arbor with a strange expression, then looked at His Highness the Crown Prince. Before she could speak, Emolian calmly put his arm around his wife's waist and whispered, Jojo, let's go to Imperial Father's place. Arbor was absolutely unwilling to enter the palace at this time. If Emolian's father saw his comical appearance, that guy might laugh for a year. No way. Arbor quickly waved his hand. Since there's nothing else with your father, I'll return to the Eastern Palace first. Emolian was secretly amused. Seeing that his wife was adamant about not going with him to see his old father, he could only nod helplessly. All right then. Jojo, go home first. I'll be back later. The outstanding talent glanced at Xiao Mu again with a strange expression. Jojo? Wasn't the crown princess called Jojo? She often heard the crown prince call her that. But the crown princess, she's still not leaving? Emolian's indifferent gaze swept over Xiao Chu, causing the latter to quickly look away. Could it be that the crown princess went to Wangchuan and was secretly attacked by enemies? Was she framed and her image changed? She had also heard that the two of them seemed to have encountered many things in Wangchuan. A while ago, the emperor had even anxiously sent shadow guards to Wangchuan to find the couple. Chapter 50-64. Given His Highness the Crown Prince's love and care for the little crown princess, he would not tolerate even a grain of sand in his eyes. He would never allow anyone to disrespect the little crown princess in any way, not even a harsh word. Therefore, her impudent and bold gaze must have angered His Highness the Crown Prince. Thinking of this, Xiao Chu couldn't help but feel a little shocked. She hurriedly restrained her expression and bowed respectfully to Arbor. Xiao Chu's eyes were poor. I didn't know that the Crown Princess was here. She quickly swept a glance at Arbor and hurriedly lowered her head. Arbor was very sharp and immediately caught the hint of surprise in this head palace maid's eyes. Yes, her current image was very bad, so it was natural for her to be surprised. However, Xiao Chu's surprise felt very strange. It seemed that her surprised gaze also contained some sympathy and pity. What the hell? Did she think that Sir Jojo's current image was permanent? I'll be able to recover in 4 hours, all right? Sir Jojo, who had been pitted for no reason, was not in a good mood. Jojo. Emolian smiled and patted her head. Your husband will be back in 2 hours. Let's have dinner together. Arbor nodded and looked at his back as he rode away. Her brows furrowed slightly. Xiaomu felt a bit strange, and her heart was a bit unsettled. Hence, she attributed this strange feeling to an omen. Her experience growing up told her that her intuition was very sharp. Little butterflies, follow His Highness into the palace to take a look. Arbor flicked her fingers. 2 black poison-tailed butterflies flapped their wings and quickly chased after Emolian. Is there something wrong with that woman? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked to Arbor's side and asked in a low voice. Her eyes are clear and her complexion normal. She wasn't drugged or controlled. She wasn't under any puppet spell. Arbor shook her head. However, her intuition had always been accurate. She had a feeling that a storm was coming. As if something was about to happen, Arbor returned to the Eastern Palace. He first returned to the Star Domain to wash up and wash off the dust on his body. When he came out, he had just sat down at the table and asked Kai Xiao to bring him a cup of tea when he received an urgent message from Mo Lian. Jojo, quickly come to Imperial Mother's Morning Sunlight Palace. Xiao Mu abruptly jumped up from her stool and knocked over the tea beside her. There was an inexplicable sense of panic in her heart that she could not suppress. He hurriedly took a robe, put it on, and ran out of the room. Then, he saw a black shadow suddenly appear beside him and hurriedly cupped his fists. Crown Princess. His Highness has ordered this subordinate to bring the Crown Princess to Morning Sunlight Palace. What happened? Arbor pursed his lips and asked sternly. His Highness the Crown Prince finished talking with His Majesty and went to the Empress. The Empress said that she had invited your mother, the Crown Princess, to the palace for tonight's banquet and asked His Highness to stay for dinner. Who knows? When your mother entered the palace, she brought you along to pay respects to the Empress. What do you mean? Sir Jojo's heart could not help but fiercely shrink. The secret guard hurriedly said, It's what you think, Crown Princess. Your mother brought a fake into the palace. Xiao Mu only felt like the world was spinning. No wonder she felt that something was off everywhere. With the country of Daluo's weak power, it was impossible for them to make a move against the Imperial Palace. They found her mother. Chapter 50-65. No wonder her heart was palpitating earlier, feeling that something was about to happen. So it was because the people of the country of Duoluo had reached into her home first? Although the Qiao estate didn't have any guards on the surface, there were hidden guards in the dark, so this point was quite strange. How did that fake enter the door without alerting the hidden guards and deceive her mother? Although her mother's cultivation wasn't high, her daughter's personality had long been imprinted in her bones and blood after interacting with her for so many years. Arbor believed that her mother definitely wouldn't mistake her for someone else. Therefore, there was a high chance that this matter was even the hidden guards of the Qiao estate had probably fallen into some kind of trap. The hidden guard saw an extremely bloodthirsty and sinister smile on the little crown princess's face. Like a devil returning from hell, that pair of deformed little eyes emitted a sinister light and emitted endless ghost energy. He immediately shuddered and didn't dare to say anything more. He turned around and led the way, rapidly leading the crown princess to the Empress Central Palace Hall. The people of the country of Duoluo had courted disaster this time by messing with the crown princess. There was no doubt that they would be in for a lot of bad luck in the future. The two figures were as fast as lightning, quickly disappearing into the dark night. On the other side of the room, Wuxia discovered that her son's complexion was very bad. His pair of cold phoenix eyes occasionally swept across the crowd, revealing an extremely chilly and austere intent. Ever since Madame Weisher brought her daughter into the palace to meet the Empress, the Crown Prince's complexion immediately changed. Wuxia felt that things were developing in a strange direction. The news of the Crown Prince's return to the capital was first informed by His Majesty. At that time, she received news that the Crown Prince and his entourage had already returned to the capital, but she didn't see the Crown Princess accompanying them. Now, the Crown Princess had only returned to her maternal home and entered the palace with her mother. Why did her son's complexion become so strange? Queen Bai secretly glared at her son, then smiled at Wei Ziqin and said, Madam Wei. Prince Imo suddenly stood up and bowed to his mother. Mother, your son will go pick up his wife. Queen Bai looked confused. She looked back at Wei Ziqin, who was smiling. She looked at the little girl next to her. What kind of person was the Empress? If she still couldn't sense that something was amiss, then she would be a real fool. She looked suspiciously at Madame Wei and her daughter before her gaze fell on Wei Ziqin. Their son spoke bluntly to the two people in front of him, and even said that he was going out to pick up his wife. What did he mean by picking up his wife? Did that mean that the little girl who looked like Jojo wasn't his wife? Could it be a fake? The more Bai Wuxia looked at Madame Wei and her daughter, the more uncomfortable he felt. She was now a little confused and kept looking at the door, waiting for her son to come in and explain to her. At first glance, he felt that there was nothing wrong with this facial paralysis in front of him. But for some reason, the more he looked, the more uncomfortable he felt. The eyebrows were very similar, but sitting there, the aura was completely different. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Wei Ziqin looked at her in confusion and asked. Why did His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly get angry? Today the Empress had summoned many women. At this moment, everyone looked curiously at Wei Ziqin and her daughter. They were more or less curious. Everyone present more or less knew that the Crown Princess was a troublemaker. Chapter 5066. After experiencing several palace banquets, most of them were very well behaved now. They didn't dare to treat the little crown princess as an ordinary person. Think about it. When did something good happen? When the little crown princess was invited to a banquet. Everyone who dared to provoke the crown princess at a palace banquet definitely didn't have a good ending. From a small matter like Madame Gua to a big matter like the City of Shadows at the most recent palace banquet, the little crown princess slapped the face of a single alchemist. She drew a sage-grade golden talisman, and even summoned a frightening ferocious beast. At that time, everyone present was dumbfounded. They couldn't think about it. If they thought too much about it, it would only make them cry. So today, when this group of noble ladies and madams saw Wei Ziqin and her daughter arrive, they all went up to greet them in a very friendly manner. All of them revealed quail-like smiles. If they couldn't offend them, then they should hide and go along with them. But they felt that things were developing in a strange direction again. His Highness the Crown Prince, who had always doted on the Crown Princess endlessly, actually gave the Crown Princess and her mother Madame Wei a cold shoulder in front of everyone today. Was the wind going to change direction again? It was said that His Highness the Crown Prince encountered a great danger during his trip to the River of Forgetfulness. When he entered the city this time, the Crown Princess wasn't by his side at all. Could it be that His Highness the Crown Prince finally couldn't stand that fierce girl and completely fell out with the Crown Princess? Prince Emo quickly walked out of the palace hall and coincidentally bumped into the outstanding talent, leading a group of people in his direction. The outstanding talent hurriedly led the group of palace maids to greet him as soon as they met. Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince. The outstanding talent said respectfully. This servant is under His Majesty's orders to bring some special tribute fruits to Your Highness and the madams. The Crown Prince swept a glance and saw many fist-sized, translucent, and pink fruits on the fruit platter. He didn't pay much attention to it, and only nodded slightly before walking over. Just as he reached the long steps in front of the palace hall, he saw a round little figure flying over as fast as lightning. He jumped in front of him in an instant. Emo Lien hurriedly reached out to hug her and lifted her sleeve to wipe the sweat off her forehead. Why did you run so fast? Don't worry, those two people won't be able to escape. Where are they? Mr. Jojo roared angrily. Emo Lien hugged her and swayed, crying out pitifully. Jojo, your husband was molested. Who? Arbor's eyes flashed with killing intent. It's that fake. She kept throwing flirtatious glances at me as soon as she arrived. At first, I thought her eyes were cramping. Arbor moved his limbs and shouted, I'm going to kill her. Let's ask him first. Emo Lien hurriedly pressed down on his wife's body and smiled. Let's get to the bottom of this first. I've already sent someone to the Qiao residence to check on the situation. We'll receive a reply soon. The outstanding talent walked a few steps and turned back to glare at a palace maid who had stopped in her tracks. Don't look around. Don't you know the rules? That palace maid hurriedly retracted her gaze and asked the outstanding talent with a strange expression. Aunt, who is that plump woman? How could she be so intimate with the crown prince? It was simply inconceivable. The outstanding talent coldly swept her a glance. Do your own thing. Don't ask about things that you shouldn't meddle in. That palace maid followed behind the group and couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Unwilling to give up, She turned back to look at the plump woman with a bucket-like waist. It seemed that His Highness the Crown Prince's judgment of people wasn't very good. He previously doted on that extremely bad-tempered Crown Princess so much. Chapter 50-67. But no matter what, even though the Crown Princess had a bad temper, she was still good-looking. But this plump woman with a bucket-like waist, no matter how one looked at her, she looked disgusting, right? Why was His Highness's eyesight getting worse and worse? The little royal maid stumbled slightly and hurriedly lowered her head to look at the road, quickly catching up with the group of outstanding talents in front of her. Jojo, don't get angry first. Let's understand the situation first. After all, they had been away from Forget River for so long, so they really didn't know what had happened at home. If by any chance Qiao Zhongbang, Wei Ziqin, and second uncle's family had all fallen into someone else's hands now, then when they did things they would definitely be restrained. That mother of yours is also a fake. Emolian lowered her head and whispered in Arbor's ear. When they met just now, the fake Wei Ziqin gave him a very fake smile, and even called him, Your Highness the Crown Prince, with some respect in her expression. How could this be Jojo's mother herself? Jojo's parents and second uncle's family all called him Little Mo when they saw him. How could they call him, Your Highness the Crown Prince? Your Highness the Crown Prince was what outsiders called him. How could his own people call him that? I'm worried about them. Arbor's expression was very ugly, especially since Xiao Yao should be about to give birth soon. She didn't know how her family was doing now. Emo Lien gripped his wife's small hand tightly and deliberately said in a relaxed tone, When we were on Sikong planet, we had seen all kinds of storms. We could even resist the siege of the Shi family of China. I believe that our family will definitely be fine. Arbor nodded and quickened her pace, walking hand in hand with Emo Lien into the main hall. Along the way, Arbor was already used to those strange gazes. It was similar to how those aunties and big sisters at the city gate looked at her. It was just that the madams and misses present here had much more noble statuses. Arbor was already very calm. In any case, her husband didn't mind, so why should she care about the gazes of others? Even if she was 70 or 80 years old and hunched over, Jojo's lotus was still Jojo's. Bai Wuxia looked up and saw the couple holding hands. He quickly stood up and asked, Tang Yuan's wife, what's wrong? How could it be? Did he take some medicine that he shouldn't have? He was still poisoned. What's going on? You're even shorter than the last time I saw you. Arbor looked at Queen Bai speechless. Emolian couldn't help but twitch her lips. Mother, can you not mention the word short? The Empress's reaction could be said to be extremely fast. A strong desire to survive arose spontaneously. No matter what had happened before, she still couldn't figure it out. At this moment, whenever they saw their son holding the hand of a lady or woman, they would recognize her as Tang Yuan's wife. Even if their daughter-in-law's appearance had changed drastically, their son would not mistake her for his wife. As a mother, how could she not know that her son's taste was unique? Wei Ziqin stood up with a slightly unpleasant expression. She coldly glanced at Arbor, who was next to the Crown Prince. What is the meaning of this, Your Highness? The women in the hall were a little confused. Their gazes all fell on Arbor's face. They couldn't help but think to themselves, I can't bear to see this. The Crown Prince is as handsome as a god, but now he's holding the hand of a short woman. The funniest one is the Empress. Chapter 50-68. The little stoic Crown Princess was clearly sitting next to Madame Nei Wei, but Her Majesty the Empress actually called that woman with a bucket-like waist her daughter-in-law. What kind of stupid thing was this? The noble ladies and madams in the hall coughed lightly and looked over in confusion. At this moment, Arbor and Emolian strode into the main hall at the same time, and their gazes immediately locked onto the mother and daughter pair. They had Wei Ziqin's face and figure, but Arbor didn't need to look to immediately sense that this woman impersonating Wei Ziqin didn't resemble her mother in any way. In Emolian's eyes, the stoic-faced young lady sitting next to Madame Nei Wei was simply trying to draw a tiger but ended up looking like a dog instead. It was simply too laughable. Jojo's adorably stoic face had been carved into the depths of his blood and bones since he was young, leaving an incomparably deep impression. Just based on this woman in front of him, she could pretend to be stoic, just by putting on a stoic face? She was more like an idiot. She looked like an idiot, and didn't seem to be quick-witted at all. His emotions were ignited at the slightest spark, and he was on the verge of exploding. Arbor suddenly felt Emolienne's finger pressing down lightly on his palm. She forcibly suppressed the fury that was about to erupt and slowly suppressed it. Since this mother and daughter pair dared to enter the palace so openly, they must have something to rely on. Otherwise, why would they dare to step into the palace's inner court and walk right into a trap? Therefore, mother and them Arbor's heart tightened slightly. You're the perfect creation, Lily, or number 0, right? This was Arbor's first time seeing someone who looked infinitely similar to her up close. If one only looked at their appearances, they really were very similar. Their appearances were almost 70% similar, and absolutely no one would be able to distinguish the two from more than 10 meters away. If this impersonator was placed together with the original little crown princess, they were completely like a pair of twin sisters. This was the real mature creation of the state preceptor. The ones he had encountered before were probably just immature imitations. Arbor's gaze fell on the woman's face. It was hard to imagine that there would actually be such a group of people in this world. They were unwilling to face their own lives, and racked their brains just to imitate others. What was the meaning of a life that was replicated like this? The stoic-faced young lady beside Madame Wei hastily stood up uneasily, and looked at Arbor in confusion. Who are you? Everyone knows that the Crown Princess is a great talisman master. She is best at drawing talismans in the air. Give me one. Arbor looked at her indifferently, and got straight to the point. Everyone had a baffled look on their faces. There were even a few nervous women, who hurriedly got up and quickly called the servant girls and manservants beside them to move their tables and chairs to the back. What kind of joke was this? The Crown Princess was about to draw talismans in the air and summon that ferocious beast, whose face couldn't be seen clearly. According to their past experience, this person who dared to provoke the Crown Princess must be tired of living. For safety's sake, the madams decided that it was better to stay away from this little Crown Princess, who could explode at any time. This impersonator actually didn't panic, and stood up naturally and gracefully. She bowed at Empress before turning to Arbor with cupped fists and a smile. Only then did she say gently, "What's so difficult about drawing talismans in the air?" "It's just that." "Madam, in what capacity are you asking me to draw talismans in the air?" Chapter 5069. As soon as the fake finished speaking, Arbor didn't say anything else. He raised his hand and swiped at the air in front of him, creating ripples. He drew and revealed talisman in a few minutes, and quickly threw it over. What was strange was that just as Arbor made this move, the fake opposite him also moved her hand very quickly. She copied him and drew a few lines in the air, as if she had learned it on the spot. Her movements were actually quite accurate. The fake also moved her finger, and quickly drew a talisman in the air, which collided head-on with the revealed talisman that Arbor had flown over. Everyone saw the two void talismans collide in the air, creating a beautiful stream of light. The power of the talisman splashed everywhere, and dissipated with a few whooshing sounds. The group of officials, madams, noble ladies, and laymen could only watch the commotion. They only saw the brilliant light in front of them, and really couldn't see what was going on. However, they could clearly see that the little woman with a water bucket waist standing next to the crown prince didn't have any change in expression when she shot out a void talisman. However, the crown princess on the other side swayed a few times. It can't be who would believe that such a fierce person like the crown princess would actually be defeated in one move. Everyone glanced at the little pudgy Qiao Mu in bewilderment, before looking at the slightly pale fake. They heard the slightly older Madame of Censor Jiang murmur in a low voice, "What we see may not be real. Could it be that the crown princess we see is actually an imposter? And the one that His Highness the Crown Prince led through the door is actually the real crown princess?" As soon as she said this, Everyone seemed to have been enlightened and instantly sobered up a bit. A madam on the side quickly nodded and said, "No wonder that water bucket cough, young madam." When she said this, she couldn't help but feel awkward. How should she address the woman with a water bucket waist at the door? She definitely didn't look young. Calling her young madam didn't seem appropriate. Calling her the crown princess, looking at that pair of mung bean eyes and that ordinary ugly face, she really couldn't bring herself to call her that. What kind of strange trick was this little crown princess up to? Why did she suddenly change her face and have to torment herself to look like a middle-aged woman? From the looks of it, His Highness the Crown Prince truly loved his wife. This little crown princess had already tormented herself into such an ugly state, but His Highness was still able to turn a blind eye to it. How great must he be to be able to do this? On Arbor's side, his eyes were slightly bright as he stared at the fake in front of him. There was a completely incomprehensible luster in his eyes. "Your imitation is not bad." Arbor took 2 steps forward and suddenly became interested. "Let me see the effect of your imitation talisman." As soon as she finished speaking, she moved like a bolt of lightning. Her fingers formed seals as she ceaselessly stirred the air in front of her, and she ceaselessly changed various hand signs and movements. Everyone only felt their vision blur as they saw the air fluctuate. Talismans glowing with purple light were drawn by the young woman, with a water bucket waist in the air. Row after row, the list went on so quickly that it made everyone's breathing stop. The head of the fake opposite him was dripping with sweat. At first, he could keep up with the speed of Arbor's talismans, but after a few minutes, even a layman could see that something was wrong. Something was too wrong. That fake crown princess's hand signs were the same as the other person's, except for the first time when a talisman flew out and knocked away the water bucket waist woman's void talisman attack. Chapter 50-70. After that, there were no more flashes of talisman light. On the other hand, the barrel-waisted woman was like a demon. Talisman after talisman appeared in the air. She continuously drew 99 void talismans. 3 in a row, 33 in a row. From top to bottom, it formed a purple talisman wall in front of everyone. Who could keep up with this speed of talisman drawing? Even if they used imitation talismans, they could not keep up with Arbor's movements and speed. Even though everyone had seen many talisman masters before, this was the first time they had seen such a scene. They were so shocked that their jaws dropped. At this moment, everyone saw the barrel-waisted woman facing the fake crown princess and coldly curl her lips. After this action, her chubby face began to change little by little. Her facial features were rapidly recovering, slowly recovering to their original appearance. This scene was indeed magical enough. The transformation talisman's effect disappeared at this moment, and the young crown prince consort regained her original appearance. The illusory excess fat on her stomach also disappeared. What replaced it was the thin figure of the crown princess, under a wide satin jacket. Her eyes were cold. It was the same rustic jacket, and the same simple silver hairpin. However, at this moment, the little crown princess was shockingly beautiful in everyone's eyes. Other people's beauty faded with the passage of time. The little crown princess seemed to be different. The little crown princess became more beautiful with the passage of time. Seeing her today, they felt that compared to the past, she seemed to have a faint charm. There was an indescribable feeling between her eyebrows. Queen Bai slapped her thigh and happily stood up. "Sweetheart, you finally changed back. Quick, quick, come to mother. Let mother take a good look at you. Daughter-in-law, I haven't seen you for a long time. Why do I feel that you've gained weight?" The crown prince could not help but roll his eyes. What was wrong with his mother? She said that his wife was short and fat. If you don't know how to speak, then don't say it. The little crown princess subconsciously touched her lower abdomen and nodded as she admitted, "I am a little plump." It was time for her to gain some weight. She should take care of her small body and let baby Mo grow up well. As an experienced person, Empress Bai's eyes immediately lit up when she saw her daughter-in-law's little action. At this moment, she couldn't care less about being an empress. She walked over to the two of them and asked, "Little glutinous dumpling, is your wife?" "Mother." Prince Emo rolled his eyes at her in dissatisfaction. Is this the time to talk about these things? How could it not be the right time? His daughter-in-law was pregnant, which was a big deal. It was much more important than those messy things. All right. Mother will let you settle the matter first. The White Queen curled her lips and stopped. She looked at the 33 rows of talisman walls in front of her daughter-in-law, and her eyes lit up. Tang Yuan's wife, what talisman formation is this? 9-9-1 attack talisman formation, Arbor said expressionlessly. I created it myself. The White Queen immediately revealed her true thoughts and nodded with praise. As expected of my daughter-in-law, you have no problem creating your own talisman formation. Quick, let Mother open her eyes and see how effective this attack talisman formation is. Mother. Emolian secretly gave her a look. The White Queen immediately understood. She raised her hand and opened it slightly. A transparent and flawless defensive wall immediately appeared between her hands. Chapter 50-71. The barrier abruptly landed beside the young Crown Prince Consort and the fake. At the same time, the Crown Prince waved his hand to form 2 defensive walls around them, following which, the 99 talismans that were drawn in the void started to spin like butterflies. The talismans spun, leaving afterimages in front of everyone. In the blink of an eye, they had surrounded the screaming fake Crown Princess. The hearts of the many noble ladies and madams of the officials all skipped a beat. They hurriedly stepped back, hoping to get as far away as possible. Fortunately, all the commotion happened within the defensive barrier that the White Queen and Prince Emo had set up together. It did not affect other places. The 99 offensive talismans spun into a cocoon shape, wrapping around the fake Crown Princess. Suddenly, in a strange way, the 99 talismans combined into a huge talisman that was more than 20 times larger than a normal talisman. It emitted a holy golden light. While everyone was gaping in shock, it charged toward the fake Crown Princess with the force of a thunderbolt. That unlucky fake was instantly bound by the golden light and pressed to the ground by that super large talisman. Instantly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. What's the use of an imitation talisman? It's similar in appearance but not in spirit. Arbor shook his head helplessly. He waved his hand and said, explode. The huge golden talisman wrapped tightly around the fake. At this moment, a strange light burst out. All the offensive talisman power turned into thousands of streams of light, piercing through the fake Crown Princess body without any hindrance. Everyone stared blankly at him. They felt that in an instant, the unlucky one had been turned into a sieve by the thousands of streams of light. Small holes appeared all over her body from top to bottom. They were all holes caused by the thousands of streams of light. They were densely arranged on her body, arms, face, and neck. After she stood up with difficulty, she raised her head. She looked very strange. It was as if she was a fountain that had been poked with thousands of needles, and was leaking from head to toe. There wasn't a single spot on his body that wasn't bleeding. Bright red beads of blood were constantly pouring out from the tiny holes on his body. The unlucky fake could only watch as his blood flowed out of his body. His entire face was no longer calm and expressionless. It was completely twisted beyond recognition. He could feel his life force slipping away, and his life was about to come to an end. You tried to paint a tiger, but ended up looking like a dog, Emolian angrily rebuked. She raised her sleeve and slapped the fake heavily across the air. Scram! Just looking at it was disgusting. She actually dared to impersonate his Charles and openly enter the palace to annoy him. She was simply courting death. Boom! The fake Crown Prince Consort fell straight to the ground, sprawled out on all fours as her limbs drooped down weakly. Wuxia called out helplessly, "Quick, someone come and carry her out. Don't dirty this consort's newly laid carpet." So hateful. The Empress walked over to her son and daughter-in-law and said with a smile, "Quick, come and tell Mother about the important matters. Tang Yuan's wife, are you? Report." At this moment, a secret guard from the palace rushed over. He knelt on one knee and said, "Reporting to the Empress, Grand Concubine Fang's carriage has been surrounded by a large group of strange-faced harpies at the east gate." The Empress' eyes narrowed dangerously. The grand concubine had indeed gone to Longting Temple to burn incense today. It was about time for her to return to the palace. She finally couldn't hold back anymore. Chapter 5072. 50824 Addendum. So that's what it was all about. Realization dawned on Queen Bai's face. She glanced at the impostor on the ground, and understanding flitted through her eyes. Your Majesty, Madame Wei is missing. A female official beside the Empress reminded her in a small voice. Queen Bai glanced, and saw that Madame Wei was nowhere to be seen. She quickly looked at her son and daughter-in-law and grumbled. Madame Wei escaped. She got off too easy. Earlier, everyone's eyes were focused on the 99 void purple talismans that flew out of Arbor. They were so shocked that they couldn't recover their wits for a while. Thus, Madame Wei took advantage of this gap, and quietly slipped out of the door. No one saw her. Arbor snorted disapprovingly. She can't escape. When Queen Bai heard this, she knew there was hope. She looked at Arbor with a curious expression. Daughter-in-law, what brilliant plan do you have? Quickly tell mother. Looking at her daughter-in-law's calm and stoic face, the Empress was dying of curiosity. I placed a tracking talisman on her. As long as she doesn't leave Dragonflame City's range, I can receive feedback on her location at any time. The little stoic whispered to the Empress. Other than that, I also sent out tracking poison-tailed butterflies to follow her. She hasn't gone far. She's circling around the chrysanthemum garden outside your hall. Is that so? Then let's hurry over and catch her. Queen Bai said in a low voice. We can't let her escape like this. Since she dares to enter the palace so openly, she must have a plan and must have something to rely on. We can't lower our guard. There's no rush. Arbor tugged on the Empress' sleeve. I placed a talisman array there. She won't be able to leave anytime soon. Queen Bai quickly asked. Daughter-in-law, when did you place a talisman array in the chrysanthemum garden? When I came, I placed a talisman array everywhere I passed. As long as I use my divine consciousness, the talisman array will activate. Queen Bai looked astonished. She glanced at her daughter-in-law and murmured. Can mother ask how many talisman arrays you placed? Arbor blinked and tilted his head. I didn't count, but there are more than 20 rune arrays. White Queen was speechless. They're all trapping arrays? All of them. Trapping array, bewildering array, killing array, gravity array. White Queen was speechless. She suddenly didn't feel like talking to her daughter-in-law. The Empress, who originally thought that her talent was not bad, felt that life was really there was no harm if there was no comparison. Once there was a comparison, she immediately felt tens of thousands of points of damage. It was simply too speechless. This little guy was actually able to set up dozens of talisman arrays that were not the same as he was on his way here? This was too inconceivable. Prince Mo, who had been pushed aside by his mother, looked speechlessly at the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, who had been whispering to each other for a long time. He quickly stepped forward and said, Mother, what are you and Jojo talking about? After he finished speaking, he hurriedly left. He had been dominating his son and daughter-in-law for so long. He was simply disrespectful. Son, your wife is really extraordinary. She's far from ordinary. Empress Bai clicked her tongue and said, You've really picked up a treasure. Of course. When Prince Mo heard his mother praise his daughter-in-law, his previous anger was immediately swept away. He put on a smiling face and nodded. Mother, Jojo's talent in drawing talismans is really you don't know if you haven't seen it. It's definitely. If Jojo says he's second, no one in this world would dare to say they're first. Chapter 5073. Yes. The White Queen nodded in agreement and thought to herself, I must go with my son and daughter-in-law later and see the dozen or so different talisman arrays set up by my daughter-in-law to broaden my horizons. The mother and son gathered together to flatter Arbor, but the person in question glanced at them helplessly. Seeing the two talking enthusiastically, Arbor could only speechlessly pull the crown prince's sleeve and point at the fake crown princess, who was paralyzed on the ground. Emolien glanced over from the corner of his eyes, only to see the fake lying on the ground suddenly move his limbs. Her hands were twisted in a very twisted posture, and turned slightly behind her back. Arbor's eyes flickered. He looked carefully and found that the fake's hands and feet were connected to a transparent thread. When the thread moved, the fake immediately got up and crawled a few steps forward in a stiff posture. 2 beams of cold light appeared in her eyes as she stared faintly at Arbor in front of her. Arbor was not afraid of her even when she was alive, let alone the puppet in front of him, who was controlled by someone else. He glanced at her contemptuously and drew 3 offensive purple talismans in the air with his fingers. Swish, swish, swish. They rushed toward the puppet's head. The fierce attacks landed on the fake's head 3 times in a row. The latter let out an unpleasant roar and crawled on the ground with her sharp nails. Filth dripped from her mouth. Why are you hiding? Since you've come, then quickly show yourself. The White Queen could not help but laugh. She raised her hands and 2 flying fireballs crashed toward the eaves. Along with a crisp bang sound, fine powder fell from the palace beam. A black figure suddenly landed on the ground. The newcomer bent over and made a defensive posture. Under the mask, a pair of small black eyes flashed with a cunning light. Your talisman skills are not bad. Arbor did not say anything and gave him 9 offensive talismans. The latter's expression immediately changed. He dodged left and right, trying to avoid her attack. However, his body moved and crashed into a defensive wall behind him. Only then did he realize that there were 4 defensive walls around him. No, the moment he appeared, he was trapped in the defensive array glyphs of the little crown princess. This abominable girl's methods were truly impressive. The Grand State Preceptor knew that it would be extremely difficult to impersonate the little crown princess. Therefore, they decided to be prepared and cast a mimic talisman on Lilier Zero. If they met the real crown princess, they could use the mimic talisman to fool others. Moreover, the Grand State Master had clearly told them from the start that they could enter the palace as they wished. The crown princess had already sent people to delay them, but now it was obvious that the plan could not keep up with the changes. Everything had failed because of the little crown princess's return to the palace. Damn it! How did things suddenly develop to this point? The people sent by the state preceptor to stall the crown prince and the crown princess were all useless. So many people couldn't even hold back 2 young people. The puppeteer dodged several attack talismans from Arbor, but when he turned around, he accidentally hit his head on the defensive wall. At that time he was drunk. He only felt a sizzling electric current on the defensive wall that slid through his body and electrocuted him, throwing him to the ground heavily. The puppeteer cursed in his heart. His eyes were so frightened that they were distorted. He quickly turned to look in the direction of Arbor. Chapter 50-74. He saw the little girl looking at him expressionlessly. Her dark eyes were filled with mockery. The pair of eyes that looked at him were completely devoid of emotion. They were like 2 deep pools of water, dead and still. How could there be such cold eyes in this world? The puppet master's entire body trembled, and he felt somewhat unwell. There was no one in this world who could be more deceitful than the little crown princess. This crown princess had built a defensive wall, but she had used some strange method to integrate the power of lightning into the defensive wall. As long as someone crashed into the defensive wall, they would immediately be injured by the power of lightning. Needless to say, the uncomfortable feeling of the lightning corroding the body was especially good. The puppet master had been caught off guard by the electric shock. Until now, his hands and feet were curled up like a shrimp. He was almost unable to speak. The White Queen looked as if she had discovered a new continent. She circled around the transparent defensive wall and exclaimed in amazement, "Daughter-in-law, what method did you use to integrate the power of the 5 spirits into the defensive wall? This method is good. Look, it caught someone off guard. Didn't that unlucky puppet master fall to the ground? Ha ha ha. In a fight, this method was too easy to be deceitful. It didn't take any effort. As long as the other party crashed into the defensive wall, he would be in big trouble. And the person who set up the defensive wall didn't need to use too much spiritual power. This was a good method to get things done once and for all. How did this little girl think of these strange methods? She was really creative. She dared to try anything." Arbor blinked. This was one of the methods of controlling spiritual power recorded in the Spirit Division record. Arbor felt that it was very useful to integrate the power of the 5 spirits into the defensive wall, defensive shield, and various defensive equipment. Thus, she studied it thoroughly. She realized that this was definitely a necessary skill for deceitful people. She immediately applied what she learned and prepared to learn all the tricks in the Spirit Division record. Mother, do you want to learn? I can teach you if there's a chance. Okay. Seeing that the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law's heads were about to tilt together again, the crown prince hurriedly stood between the two of them and said with a serious face, Jojo, stop fooling around. Let's quickly figure out the situation at home first. When Xiaomu heard this, she couldn't be bothered with probing that puppet cultivator anymore, and sent her husband a look. Emolian raised her hand slightly. Immediately, 4 black shadows pierced through the air, and beat the puppet master to the ground in a few moves. They lifted him up and threw him in front of the crown prince and the young crown princess. Madame Wei wandered around the large chrysanthemum garden for about half an hour. The more she wandered, the more she felt that the scenery before her was very strange. Why was he always walking around in circles in this area? She was shocked and immediately reacted. She might have been plotted against. Just as she was about to stop and think carefully about what to do, a cold wind blew past her. She saw an old man with gray hair and beard appear in front of her with a cold expression. State Preceptor. The fake Madame Wei first let out a small sigh of relief. Then, she was shocked and hurriedly lowered her head in greeting. State Preceptor Larry coldly glanced at the fake Madame Wei. You're too useless. These two people didn't even last a quarter of an hour in the hall before their true identities were exposed. Truly useless. Chapter 5075. Thinking about how his most perfect creation, Lily or number 0, had been ruined in the hands of the other party, he felt extremely uncomfortable. How abominable. Ha Duo Gu Air. And the woman in front of him were all useless, the best of the worst. Ha Duo was especially disappointing. He brought 5,000 men to guard the outskirts of Dragon Flame City. He was guarding against the crown prince and the crown princess suddenly returning to the capital, who knew that no matter how much he tried, he still couldn't prevent them from returning. He had returned, and he had returned to the imperial capital in secret. When he received the news and realized that something was wrong, it was already too late to inform everyone to retreat. Follow me. This double trap array couldn't stop Larry. This person shook out a bright yellow lamp from his sleeve. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a trace of a cold smile. No matter how dense the array was, he had a divine artifact and could naturally break through any miasma in front of him. The fake Madame Wei was slightly relieved. She quickly nodded and followed Larry. As she walked, she lowered her head and said, Lord Grand Tutor, I'm afraid Lily or number 0 and the puppet master are, more likely than not. It bodes ill. Fortunately, she reacted quickly and slipped away. Otherwise, she would be one of the people who died in the Empress Central Palace. Grand Tutor Larry didn't say a word. He turned around and led her to wander around the chrysanthemum garden, following the floating lamp in front of them. They seemed to walk without any pattern. In less than half an hour, he led the fake Madame Wei out of the chrysanthemum garden. The fake Madame Wei heaved a sigh of relief and bowed. Thank you, Lord Grand Tutor. Suddenly, State Preceptor Larry reached out and grabbed her by the throat, causing the fake Madame Wei to stare at him in panic. The fake Madame Wei wanted to say something, but she didn't even have the strength to speak. Her eyes were full of fear as she stared at the Lord Grand Tutor, who suddenly changed his expression, and she made a sound. With the sound of her neck breaking, the fake Madame Wei's eyes were bloodshot as she widened her eyes in disbelief. Crack! State Preceptor Larry mercilessly crushed the fake Madame Wei's neck and said coldly, Idiot! Such an idiot should not be alive to waste resources. Just as he was about to leave, he turned around to stare at the fake Madame Wei's wide-eyed face and smiled sinisterly. On the other side, Arbor, who was secretly checking the whereabouts of the fake Madame Wei, suddenly stopped and looked up at Emolian with a puzzled expression. What's wrong, Jojo? We suddenly lost contact. Arbor was suspicious. He tugged at Emolian and whispered, Let's go out and take a look. The tracking talisman on the fake had lost its effect? There could only be two possibilities. The first possibility was that the fake discovered the existence of the tracking talisman and removed it. Secondly, the fake was already dead. Naturally, the tracking talisman lost its effect. I wonder what kind of situation it is. Mo Lian hummed in response, and naturally followed his wife out of the central palace's main hall. Seeing this, Empress Bai hurriedly raised her feet to catch up with her son and daughter-in-law. She trotted all the way to catch up with them. Huh. Arbor couldn't help but let out a puzzled sound. Mo Lian sniffed around and looked around for a while before saying, Jojo, someone used a divine artifact here. Chapter 5076. Arbor couldn't help but laugh. This fellow's nose was really sharp. She could even sniff out the scent of a divine weapon being used by someone else. Did that fake walk out of your double confinement formation? The White Empress couldn't resist asking. Someone probably barged in and took her out. Arbor carefully sensed and confirmed this point. There were clearly two people's auras flowing in this formation. This meant that the fake was taken away by someone. A faint sneer appeared on Arbor's lips. Excellent. Then she wanted to see how many of her talisman formations this person's divine weapon could break. When she thought of this, a cold glint flitted through her eyes. Her thoughts turned at lightning speed, and her divine sense moved, activating all the talisman formations she set up along the way. It was fine if someone from the palace accidentally stepped into her talisman formations. With the current strength of her divine sense, she had no problems controlling talisman formations from a distance of 500 kilometers without harming any innocent people. As for the person who rashly barged into her talisman formations and took the fake out by activating the divine weapon, Arbor curled her lips coldly. You can only blame yourself for not taking the path to heaven and barging into hell when there was no door to hell. Arbor followed the traces left behind by the tracking talisman several hundred meters forward and discovered the fake Madame Neiwei's wide-eyed body under a green plant. At first glance, everyone was shocked by the fake Madame Neiwei's death. Her eyes were wide open and empty, as if she had seen something, and her mouth also gaped. She wanted to cry out as if she was caught off guard, but she still couldn't make a sound at the last moment of her life. Her death was incomparably miserable. Arbor only swept her a glance before turning her face away in disgust. Now this fake Madame Neiwei had revealed her true appearance. Her round and plump middle-aged woman's face didn't resemble her mother Madame Neiwei in the slightest. This directional transformational medicinal liquid was truly extremely annoying. She had to speed up and develop a medicine that was faster than forcing people to take the antidote orally. It would be best if it was something like a medicinal powder. She could make people reveal their true appearance with a casual sprinkle. This way, it would be more convenient and more effective. When she thought of this, the little stoic's tightly pursed lips couldn't help but droop slightly, revealing a solemn and serious expression. How did this fake die? A female official beside the Empress quickly walked forward and was about to squat in front of the corpse to take a look. He only heard the little stoic shout, "Don't move!" The female official's hand, which was about to flip the corpse, froze in midair. The little stoic rushed forward and directly poured half a bottle of corpse-dissolving water on the fake Madame Neiwei's body, dissolving the corpse in a matter of minutes without even blinking. The onlookers stole a glance at her and felt a chill in their hearts. The young crown prince consort was truly ruthless. The White Empress purposely said to everyone, "This corpse must have been poisoned by someone. If Autumn Leaf had touched it just now, she definitely wouldn't have gotten any benefits." Everyone came to a sudden realization and stole another glance at the little crown princess. The latter was expressionless, but his gaze was fixed on the corpse that had turned into water. After the corpse was dissolved, she stepped forward again and took out a bottle. She then sprinkled something in a radius of several feet to purify the poison that had seeped into the soil. It had to be known that if the Empress didn't give her an explanation, the little crown princess wouldn't bother to explain even half a sentence in 10,000 years. So what if she dissolved it? In any case, in other people's eyes, she was an especially cruel person. When had she ever cared about other people's opinions? Chapter 50-77. Although the female official Autumn Leaf was startled, she quickly reacted and hurriedly bowed to Arbor, thanking her gratefully. Many thanks to the Crown Princess for the reminder. If the Crown Princess hadn't spoken so quickly just now, she didn't know what would have happened to her. Seeing how the Crown Princess handled the corpse so cautiously, it could be seen that the poison on the corpse wasn't something simple. The detestable murderer killed this woman and left her in the chrysanthemum garden. Before leaving, he even set a trap for everyone and left behind a trace of the poison. It was truly extremely sinister. Arbor nodded slightly, but didn't say anything. She was the only one who knew that the poison on the corpse was contagious. If anyone touched a bit of it on their hands, the poison would quickly spread and spread. If anyone came into contact with it, they would also quickly be infected with this poison. If she didn't clean it up, once this poison spread in the palace, the consequences would be unthinkable. That person can't have escaped too far. The 20 or so talisman arrays she had set up were twisted and turned like a maze. They could be combined together to work at the same time, but they could also be used separately to block and kill. Only she knew best how to use them. Even if that person had a divine weapon as a guide, he probably wouldn't be able to escape her maze of multiple talisman arrays. Arbor turned to Emolien and said, "You and Mother. Mother, stay here. I'll go with you." Prince Emo immediately interrupted Arbor and hurriedly stood next to his wife. What a joke! How could he be at ease letting his wife run after such a dangerous person alone? Absolutely not, he had to follow. Me. I'll go too. How could she not watch when there was a show? Wuxia also hurriedly reached out to sign up. Seeing this, the old nanny following the Empress couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She hurriedly raised her hand to support the Empress's raised hand and coughed lightly. Your Highness, can we not get so excited just because there's a show, Mother? Aren't you going to the East Gate to check on the Grand Concubine's condition? The little Crown Princess asked in confusion. Consort Dowager? Reminded by Arbor, Queen Bai seemed to have just remembered the old princess. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, No, your father should have sent someone over. Father? The Empress nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, Aya, do you think your father is completely defenseless? In fact, as early as a few days ago, your father had already sensed that the capital was not peaceful. Over the past few days, he has already sent people to strengthen the security. The secret guards have already investigated the other party's identity. Your father is biding his time, waiting for the other party to make the first move and expose themselves. Queen Bai looked like she was enjoying the show. Just now, I heard that the concubine dowager was in danger at the East Gate. Only then did I know why these two fakes entered the palace. They must be here to create chaos and provide cover for others. Wuxia snorted and said, She really has a good plan. Unfortunately, she is unlucky to have met her daughter-in-law as soon as she entered the palace. Not only did she meet the real person, but she was also killed by the real person with one hand. Of course, her fate was extremely bad. The Empress talked to herself for a while, and suddenly glanced at her son and daughter-in-law. She saw that the young couple was looking at her with the same expression. She couldn't help but feel happy when she saw this. She smiled and asked, Do you admire your father and mother? Chapter 50-78. Prince Emo sighed ruefully in his heart. As expected, this biological father of his was truly much more reliable than the old great king of the Emo Kingdom, His Highness the Crown Prince, who had been cleaning up after his adoptive father's messes for more than a decade, suddenly felt a bit idle. His biological father was truly capable, and he didn't need to worry too much about court affairs now. He also handled crisis situations quite well. Arbor couldn't help but sigh ruefully in his heart. He raised his small hand and patted Prince Mo's lapel. Pretty good. It was pretty good. Prince Emo thought that he finally didn't have to rush about and toil so hard in the future. He was also a child who could rely on his father on the other side. Empress Bai held her daughter-in-law's hand and nagged. Little glutinous dumpling's father has been so busy these past 2 days that I haven't seen him at all. I wanted to reprimand him, but now it looks like he didn't work for nothing. Glutinous Dumpling's wife. Let's go take a look at the person who fell into your talisman matrix first. Then, let's go to the East Gate to see your father. When your father was young, he was extraordinarily valiant and could fend off 100 enemies alone. He was definitely an expert in battle. But he's not too bad now. Empress Bai glanced at her son with a grin. Son, you can't be thinking that your father and mother are still in the dark about the situation in the city, right? Your father and mother aren't old yet. At the very least, we can still support you juniors for 30 to 50 years. It's absolutely not a problem. Emolian couldn't help but laugh. She tugged her mother's hand and pretended to be obedient. Mother, how can 30 to 50 years be enough? At least several hundred years. You must support your son and daughter-in-law. The little stoic very much agreed with these words and nodded empathetically. Support. If father caused trouble for Jojo's lotus, then beat father. If the officials caused trouble for Jojo, then beat those old officials who didn't know what was good for them. When Her Majesty the Empress saw her stoic-faced daughter-in-law's expression, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. The old nanny serving beside her couldn't help but twitch the corners of her eyes. She coughed lightly and reminded, Your Highness, it's already been a quarter of an hour. You three women are chattering endlessly here. Do you still want to do something serious? The White Queen patted her thigh and quickly said, Yes, let's go and take a look. We still have to hurry to the East Gate to watch the show. The old nanny couldn't help but be speechless. She didn't even have the strength to ridicule her Imperial Highness. Her temperament had remained the same for decades. Even after sleeping for so many years, she still hadn't changed at all. He would go wherever there was a commotion. The group of people followed Arbor out of the chrysanthemum garden and walked along the palace walls for about half an hour. Only then did they stop in a courtyard next to a painted corridor. It's such a remote place. White Queen looked around curiously. Jojo, are you sure it's here? Arbor nodded and waved her small hand at everyone. Then, she strode forward into that painted corridor. The group of people followed the little crown princess over. Sure enough, they didn't walk far before they saw a bearded, gray-haired elderly man with a drooping face. He was fiddling with a lamp in his hand. Arbor's small face was taut as she expressionlessly said, No need to try. Do you think you can get out of the talisman matrix that I set up? You will definitely trigger the other talisman matrices if you walk out of the first double confinement matrix. Talisman matrices within talisman matrices, one set after another. Just 20 or so sets of talisman matrices that didn't overlap would exhaust people to death inside. Chapter 5079. No matter how powerful a godly artifact was, it couldn't withstand this kind of consumption. Sooner or later, it would run out of uses. Grand State Preceptor Larry was facing such an awkward situation. The guiding light had run out of uses, but he was still spinning around in an unknown rune array. Even if he used his godly power to bombard the surroundings, the godly power he used up would only merge into the endless void. It was like punching into a pile of cotton. He couldn't hit anything substantial at all. This Grand State Preceptor turned around and stared at Arbor with a malicious gaze. This gaze angered His Highness the Crown Prince, who was beside Sir Jojo. You don't want your trick anymore? The Crown Prince sneered. His right hand, which was next to his robe, suddenly moved. A dark purple stream of light was already wrapped around his hand. Xiao Mu hastily tugged at his hand, making him withdraw the purple flames. You're that Grand State Preceptor Lila, Arbor said with a cold expression. I didn't expect you to enter the Imperial Palace alone. Lila, I don't know if I should praise you for your courage or say that you're stupid. Do you think you're very secretive? Stupid. Emolian was speechless. His wife had called this Grand Preceptor's name wrong twice in a row. He was too embarrassed to open his mouth and remind his wife that she called his name wrong. Moreover, he kept saying that the other party was stupid. Anyone who heard this would fly into a rage. Prince Emo sneaked a glance at Grand State Preceptor Larry's face. As expected, his face was as black as charcoal. Stupid girl, how dare you? Grand State Preceptor Larry roared. His entire body was so tense that he could shoot out in an instant. Like an arrow on a bow, he could charge toward Arbor at any time. "Husband." Sir Jojo raised a pair of big black eyes and stared at him defensively. Her instinctive reaction was to summon her husband. Emolien's mouth twitched as he facepalmed. Before his brain could make a judgment, his body had already flashed very honestly, and he flew over by himself. He landed in front of State Preceptor Larry, with a whoosh like a bolt of black fire, as fast as lightning. The Grand State Preceptor probably didn't expect that the other party would be so immoral as to attack immediately. This guy didn't have time to defend himself, and a cluster of black flames almost burned the tip of his nose. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat, and his body stiffly fell backward. He fell quickly and fiercely. As a result, he landed solidly on the ground with a bang. The two blue and white tiles on the ground cracked. Everyone couldn't help but stare at the sky speechlessly. This Grand State Preceptor was too unlucky to have met such a fiendish couple. Today he would definitely not be able to get over it. Grand State Preceptor Larry rolled on the ground and was about to stand up. Crown Prince Emo expressionlessly flung out a dozen talismans at him. However, with a burst of bone-cracking sounds, this unlucky State Preceptor was unable to straighten his body like a carp doing a somersault instead. It was as if all the bones in his body had been crushed. Every part of his body was in excruciating pain. Arbor's eyes lit up. The speed at which her husband threw the gravity talisman was too fast, and his gesture was too cool. Just as this Lila was about to stand up, he was smashed by the gravity talisman. The force of the impact collided with the force of the gravity talisman. The timing was just right. This unlucky State Preceptor's body should have been crushed by the force of the collision. "Idiot!" Arbor scolded crisply. She walked over to Emolien's side and said, "Search." Chapter 50-80. She didn't want to waste time with this person, so she directly searched his soul to see what kind of plan the Kingdom of Dayuo had. Did they capture the people of the Qiao residence? Larry saw the two approaching, and it looked like they were going to search his soul. This guy's whole body shook, and he used his fingers to pull out a talisman. In a flash of golden light, he disappeared from the spot. Arbor was astonished and muttered to herself, "Sacred-grade golden talisman." This person actually had a sacred-grade teleportation talisman hidden on him. She had studied the golden talisman jade tome for so long, but she had never seen anyone else in this world who could draw a sacred-grade golden talisman. Lord Jojo pondered for a moment, and her curiosity about the Hall of Heavenly Fate talisman incantation deepened. There must be capable people in the Hall of Talisman Incantation that she had never met before. Someone who could draw a sacred-grade golden talisman. On Changle North Street, in an inconspicuous courtyard, young Master Omega Kotoku was wearing a plain and thin garment, and his expression was cold as he sat in front of a rockery in the courtyard, waiting for news. Soon, a tall and thin man quickly walked in, hurried to his side, and leaned over to whisper in his ear. The second young master frowned and nodded indifferently. "Do as I say." "Yes, young master." The tall and thin man, Fei Zhuang, flashed and disappeared from the courtyard. Duga Ling jumped down from the eaves and lazily tilted his head with a smile. "I can't figure it out." "What can't you figure it out?" Young Master Omega Kotoku grumpily retorted. He was very irritated and didn't want to waste time with people. "I can't figure it out. Aren't you also tired of seeing that Lily Air Zero? Why are you still helping them? Moreover, since the plan failed, it means that the people of Dayuo have no value. Why are you still escorting them out of the capital?" The second young master coldly said. "Do you know who the king of Dayuo is?" Duga Ling shook his head. "I don't know. Actually, he wasn't that curious. It didn't matter if he knew or not. In any case, this country of Dayuo probably had nothing to do with him." Omega Kotoku did not continue speaking. He only glanced sideways at him. "What are you waiting for?" "All right." Duga Ling nodded helplessly. "All right, I won't ask you why, but sigh." He clearly wanted to get closer, but no matter what he did, he kept pushing her away. It seemed like he was pushing her further and further away. Moreover, now that the little girl knew about the second young master's identity, there was bound to be no result. Ever since he had returned from the River of Forgetfulness, the second young master had always been on the verge of exploding. He was like a walking volcano, and no matter who he saw, he was extremely displeasing to the eye. Even the eldest young master couldn't stand his bad temper, and found an excuse to slip away. The kingdom of Daluo was beaten by the Tsang prefecture's troops and horses. They fled from the grassland to the second young master's place. Ling clearly saw a trace of killing intent in second young master's eyes at that moment. But Ling did not know why he would help them. Second young master had a stubborn temperament, and was a stubborn person. He must have his reasons for doing so. He flashed out of the courtyard, but before he could take 2 steps, he was blocked by a man in plain clothes. Eldest young master? Dugu Ling looked at Qin Xian with a puzzled expression. Eldest young master was deliberately waiting for him at this corner? Don't meddle in Daluo's affairs. Chapter 5081. When I came, I saw notices posted all over the streets to capture the fugitives from the state of Duo Luo. Eldest young master Qin looked calmly at Dugu Ling. The entire city has been sealed off. That guy Emolian is personally leading a group of the capital's elite troops, as they traverse the streets and alleys, to capture this group of people. At this point, the eldest young master couldn't help but get angry. From the looks of it, that guy Emolian was truly a hypocrite. He was more adept at using insidious methods than anyone else. That guy had ordered people to set up testing talisman arrays all around the city gates. Anyone entering or leaving would have to pass through the talisman arrays. There wouldn't be any problem if an ordinary person walked through. But if an expert above the god realm passed by, those lousy talisman arrays would immediately beep incessantly. How would the eldest young master know so many things after entering the city? As soon as he floated through the talisman arrays, a fucking string of guards would run after him while brandishing their machetes. They would yell and call for nearby brothers to surround and intercept him. He was chased all over the streets by several hundred guards, and almost didn't make it back. What a fucking scam. Was there anyone else like him? So what if they were God Realm cultivators? There were plenty of cultivators above the God Realm in Dragon Flame City. Did they have to capture and investigate every single one of them? That was simply insane. Those remaining trash from the state of Duo Luo are no longer of any use. It's only a matter of time before they are found, the eldest young master said indifferently. You won't gain anything by interfering. Dugu Ling was silent after hearing eldest young master Qin's analysis. Eldest young master Qin sighed and said, You still don't understand? Perhaps the emperor of the divine prefecture had already investigated the identities of those people from the state of Duo Luo from the very beginning. He was only waiting for this bunch of idiots to walk right into his trap. And we actually helped the great emperor. Although they didn't want to admit it, reality proved that they had stupidly walked right into the emperor's trap. Many thanks to eldest young master for the reminder. Dugu Ling cupped his hands at eldest young master Qin. Since second young master has given the order, we have to do it no matter how difficult it is. Eldest young master, please be at ease. This subordinate will be careful and won't be easily discovered. Since eldest young master said that there were such testing talisman arrays all around the city gate, then he wouldn't go to the city gate to take a look. Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't help but shake his head speechlessly when he saw Dugu Ling cupping his hands at him, before turning to leave quickly. You won't cry until you see the coffin. I'll let this fellow personally experience how much of a scam this Emo brat is. After bidding farewell to eldest young master Qin, Dugu Ling quickly headed for an inn in the city. Previously, the upper echelons of the kingdom of Daluo had stayed in this inconspicuous inn. However, with the current situation so tense, there was no guarantee that those upper echelons had already changed places. Dugu Ling's figure flashed as he walked out of the remote alley. He pretended to glance at the street casually. He saw a group of valiant and high-spirited soldiers wearing short armor neatly pass in front of him. There were many more patrolling guards on the streets. As expected, the security was much tighter. Just as he was pondering, he suddenly heard a series of beeping sounds coming from beneath his feet. He didn't pay much attention at first, But his heart involuntarily thumped when he saw all the pairs of eyes on the street looking in his direction. "Capture him!" a leading soldier on a horse yelled as he pointed in Duga Ling's direction. Chapter 5082. Duga Ling felt as if 10,000 horses were galloping across his mind. Before his brain could even react, his body had already started to run away. In an instant, many guards appeared from all over the streets and alleys. They held spears and swords in their hands as they yelled and chased after him. Duga Ling's jaw almost dropped to the ground. He saw the commoners, who were used to this sight, squat to the sides of the road with their hands on their heads, allowing the group of soldiers to chase after others. Occasionally, they would look up and roll their eyes in disdain. It was as if this scene happened every day, and the commoners were already used to it. Duga Ling cursed in his heart as he dashed up the tree and leaped onto the roof in a few leaps. What was even worse was that there were quite a few young faces on the eaves. They were holding a broken net in their hands and were trying to outflank him from all sides. "You motherfuckers!" Duga Ling had just started cursing when he saw 4 or 5 nets coming towards him. He didn't even have time to say anything and quickly jumped behind the eaves. He jumped and fled into the back alley. There are no signs of fighting in the Qiao residence. Clearly, the fake goods didn't alert anyone when they moved in. The 8 hidden guards arranged in the Qiao residence also disappeared at the same time. Tong stood in front of the young crown princess with his head lowered and reported everything to her. This subordinate has checked the traces. The crown princess family didn't leave behind any signs of being kidnapped. It seems like Tong's voice paused. He looked up slightly and saw Arbor looking at him. He quickly lowered his head and didn't dare to meet his gaze. He quickly said in a low voice, "Master and Madam's family seems to have left the Qiao residence on their own." Arbor frowned and opened a brocade box in his hand. He looked at the wooden tablets in the box, and his expression relaxed. In the middle of each tablet, there was a faint flame burning, as if it was embedded in the tablet. It pulsed with a strong vitality. These were the life lanterns of Qiao Zhongbang, his younger brother, sister, and second uncle's family in the Qiao residence. Now that the life lanterns were safe and sound, and even had a strong vitality, it was clear that his parents weren't in danger. What the hell is going on? Jojo was puzzled. "Crown Princess." A clear and loud voice came from the window. The young Crown Prince Consort looked over without batting an eyelid. There were only a few people who liked to poke their heads out of the window, staying up late, having midnight snacks and so on. All of them had this hobby and habit. Sure enough, not long after, Aoya's big head swayed outside the window. His bright smile was dazzling. "I've investigated it thoroughly. Crown Princess, don't be anxious. His Highness said that he will tell you personally when he returns later. Master, Madam, and Second Master's family are very safe. Xiao Yao gave birth to a boy successfully last night. Master, Madam, and the others are very happy." "Really?" Arbor's eyes brightened, and a smile appeared on the little stoic's face. The large rock in her heart finally fell heavily. Yeah. Aoyi nodded his big head repeatedly and said with a grin, "His Highness told this subordinate to inform you personally when he returns, so that you won't think too much. His Highness also said that Crown Princess's trap, cough, testing talisman matrix is especially useful. He placed one in every street and alley, and as long as it beeps, he can immediately arrest someone. Also, that net specially used to trap Divine Realm cultivators is especially useful." Chapter 5083. That's a divine weapon invented by your Crown Prince. It specializes in tricking cultivators above God level, Arbor said expressionlessly, catching God level cultivators off guard and trapping them. "It wasn't me who took it out. It's not like all the tricking was done by this Crown Princess, humph." Aoya's mouth twitched. "Master and Mistress, they really are a family. Don't say who tricked more. Then this subordinate is going to work. Crown Princess, His Highness wants you to play for a while. His Highness will come back later to have dinner with you." The little Crown Princess made a sound of acknowledgement and saw Aoya's big head shrink down from the window. "Play what?" Lady Qiao Qiao pondered for a moment before waving her hand gently. Her figure then disappeared from the bedchamber. After learning that his family was safe, Arbor finally had the mood to do something else. Your Highness, the testing glyph arrays on the streets and alleys are not responding. Could it be that the other party learned their lesson and stayed in their rooms? His Highness the Crown Prince thought for a moment and shook his head. Right now, the city is under lockdown. Even if they don't come out, our people will go door to door to check. With the testing glyph, we can find out what cultivation level the person in the room has. They can't run away. Emolien snorted. The only thing we can do now is take a gamble and get out of the city as soon as possible. Only then can we have a chance of survival. So the remnants of Doruo will break through the city gates today? At the same time, countless teams were patrolling the streets and alleys, checking for suspicious people one after another. In a private room on the second floor of the overflowing fragrance garden, the curtain on the window was lifted slightly and put down in less than a second. Cough, cough. Heavy coughs were suppressed by that person's handkerchief, making muffled sounds. Master. The man coughed a few times and raised his face slightly, waving his hand at his subordinate. It was a very old face. Under the gray hair was a pair of tired eyes that were bloodshot. He looked like he had not rested for several nights. The subordinate used a black cloth to cover half of his face, only revealing a circle of pockmarks under his eyes, as if his skin had been burned by fire. After so many years, I didn't expect, the gray-haired old man let out a long sigh. He is even more ruthless and decisive than before. I didn't lose to him, the old man said calmly. I only lost to the power in his hands. If he had such a large force, he could also suppress that person and make it difficult for him to continue living. However, he didn't. Some things once lost were gone. No matter how much one fought for them in the future, they couldn't be regained. The old man sighed in response. The subordinate hurriedly reminded. Master, the most important thing right now is to get out of the city as soon as possible. Right now, everyone in the city is looking for us. The longer we stay in the city, the more dangerous it will be. Their plan had failed. Originally, they had sent people to mix in with Consort Dowager Chen's caravan returning to the palace, who knew that they would be stopped at the east gate, and their identities would be exposed on the spot. Even though they had decisively taken Consort Dowager hostage and fought for a chance of survival for themselves, protecting their master and escaping, their brothers had suffered countless casualties along the way. After being chased and killed all the way, they had just counted the number of people. Of the original 3,000 people, only 300 were left. The casualties were more than 80 to 90%. Chapter 5084. They had completely lost the scheme. Heavenly fortune is only SO. The subordinate said indignantly. I originally thought that they could turn the tide, but I didn't expect, in the end, the thousands of harpies sent to help them were all killed by the Emperor's personal troops. Simply hateful. The gray-haired elderly man waved his hand with a wry smile. I always knew that relying on others was ultimately futile. Unfortunately, he was clearly not capable enough to rely on himself. Alas, after scheming for so many years, he truly didn't want to wait any longer. With such a good cooperation opportunity in front of him, he only wanted to strive for it with all his might. Thump, 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 thump. Disorderly footsteps came from the bottom of the stairs, accompanied by the madam's unique shriek. Esteemed officials, how can our overflowing fragrance garden harbor filth? Everyone lighten your footsteps. Our garden's ladies have been tired from the entire night, and are currently resting, hee. The black-masked subordinate's expression abruptly darkened, and his hand reflexively stroked the hilt of a saber at his waist. Afternoon. When Lord Xiao Qiao expressionlessly appeared in the empty space behind the Eastern Palace's sleeping quarters with a large pot of medicinal powder, 17 to 18 junior eunuchs and junior palace maids cowered and gathered together, looking at their crown prince consort with bitter gazes. Assemble! Kai Chi stood on the side and waved the silk handkerchief in her hand, directing everyone to stand in line. The junior eunuchs and junior royal maids bitterly lowered their heads to glance at the medicinal bottles in their hands, extremely hesitant. Kaishio speechlessly twitched her mouth and coughed lightly, saying, "The crown princess naturally won't harm us servants. Drink it all." "Right." Kaichi jumped down from the stone block and raised the small bottle in her hand, shouting energetically, "Everyone raise the bottle together and drink." The group of eunuchs and junior royal maids promptly closed their eyes like heroes about to go to the guillotine. At the same time, they stretched out their hands and raised their heads, gulping down the medicinal liquid in the bottle in one gulp. Although the little stoic was expressionless, the corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows imperceptibly twitched. "Please, this wasn't poison." Passed down the empress order. A young eunuch with a round head and a fat head was jogging over with a smile on his face. The first thing he saw was the crown princess, who was standing in front of the crowd with a big pot in her hand. His expression froze for a moment, however. Before he could react, the rows of maids and eunuchs, standing opposite the crown princess, fell to the ground with their heads covered. The messenger eunuch was startled, but he didn't cry out in alarm. The eunuchs and palace maids who had fallen to the ground quickly climbed up even faster. One by one they stood upright. However, when they stood up, the messenger eunuch was so frightened that he fell to the ground. What a feast for the eyes! When dozens of little eunuchs and palace maids had their bodies and faces completely changed in front of your eyes, it was a horrifying scene that made your hair stand on end. What was more, when these little eunuchs and palace maids all transformed into a sturdy middle-aged man with an unshaven beard 3 minutes later, there was no need to mention the visual shock. The messenger eunuch fell backwards with a thump and closed his eyes. He had actually fainted from everyone's fright. The young crown princess expressionlessly turned her head to glance at the eunuch while holding the big pot. Her chin lightly pointed in that direction, and 2 black-clothed hidden guards twitched their eyes before instantly appearing behind her. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.